At 6 o'clock, and the City of Oregon City work session will come into order. Can you please call the roll, Mr. Lee?
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Mayor Denise McGriff is absent, excused, and Commission President Marl.
Here. As was noted, the mayor is not here, and I'm sure she'd have plenty to say on these topics, and so we do miss her, but on the bright side, I am sure that our meeting will be about half as long as it would have been. So first, for item number 1, we have a presentation from the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde on the Tumwata Village update, and so Mr. Conkle, if you'll please introduce the subject.
Before we get started, I'm going to ask the attorney to talk a little bit about the work session tonight and be able to answer any questions the commission has as to the information that we're taking in tonight and how we're going to proceed.
I have a voice that carries, you know. Okay, so tonight the commission is going to hear an informational presentation from the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, and the commission needs to be aware that this presentation requires land use review, and if they're going to pursue it, as I understand it, they will need to amend the master plan approval that they have. And so they will be, in the near future, filing an application for a master plan approval. And that will be a quasi-judicial process where ex parte contacts and conflicts of interest matter. So I want the commission to be aware of that as they hear the presentation tonight. Just out of an abundance of caution, we are going to put a recording of this work session in the record for the master plan when it comes before you, when it comes to pass, so that everyone will be aware of the commissioner's comments if they choose to make any tonight. But just remember that anything you say could be, used against you if someone were to challenge you for just questioning your impartiality. So keep that in mind. The purpose of tonight is not to apply the criteria or evaluate whether or not it satisfies the code. There will be an opportunity to do that. Tonight is an informational opportunity for you to hear what the tribe is proposing. So if you have any questions or points of clarification, I'd be happy to answer them. If not, then I would urge you to go ahead.
Are there any questions? No.
I have one.
Go ahead.
So whether this would be a type 2 or type 3, would that depend on?
I think it's a type 3.
Type 3?
I believe so, and that would go to the planning commission and then be appealed, I believe, to the city commission.
Okay, thank you.
Really do appreciate representatives from the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde being willing to come tonight and present to us and the commission their Tumwata Village master plan update and information about it. This is obviously a significant site development opportunity for the Confederated Tribes Grand Ronde, but it's also a significant opportunity for the city of Oregon City and the larger region. So as you probably remember, the site was purchased in August of 2019. The 23-acre site is located within the tribe's ancestral homelands and holds significant historical and cultural importance. In the staff report, I also provided you a link to their website of the project. If you have an opportunity to look at that, a ton of great information on there. So I will go ahead and hand this over to Ryan and Kristen, and we can do introductions, or how you'd like to start?
No, I appreciate the time. First, I do want to acknowledge that we have some of our council members here in the audience today. We have our Councilwoman Denise Harvey, Councilwoman Kathleen George, and then also Councilman John George as well. So I always appreciate them joining us and talking about the site and their support for this project, for this site. I'll also, before I introduce myself, say that any opportunity that we get to talk about this site and the kind of significance for the tribe, and honestly, everything that we've been doing since we purchased the property is a great celebration, and I always love talking about everything that we do. It really, when you get into the details of everything, doing it day in, day out, being able to step back and talk about it to an audience, it is really quite exciting. So I appreciate that opportunity. My name is Ryan Webb. I am the Engineering and Planning Manager for the tribe. I've worked for the tribe now since 2020. I was originally hired purely to help kind of manage and deliver this site for the tribe. My position is somewhat morphed into a lot of other things, but this has definitely been a continued focus and to really continue to work on it and heal and restore the land. And so it's one of the reasons why I love being an engineer, and one of the reasons why I took the opportunity with the tribe, because this site really is kind of a legacy project for my career. And so it's been really exciting to be a part of your city and to be a part of that site as well. Prior to that, I worked for the city of Portland for a decade as an engineer in their transportation program. I helped design and deliver a lot of road and bridge projects for them. This development work was a little out of my wheelhouse, but it's been an exciting challenge to date, that's for sure. And with that, I'll let Kristen introduce herself too.
Perfect. Adjust this. There we go. Hello, my name is Kristen Svakarovich. I am the Tribe's Community Development Manager, so I work in Ryan's department and have been with the tribe for, 2.5 years now. And so my role at the tribe, I oversee tribal planning, and I also see the tribe's grants program. I am also a registered professional engineer, so have that background. And then I also have served through my career. I've worked in the private sector. I've worked for local government. Like you all, I also was the city councilor and council chair for the city of Dundee during the delivery of the Newburgh-Dundee bypass. So worn that hat at one point in time. Just really excited to be here today and to talk about this project. One other important thing before we sort of dive into the presentation, sort of culturally appropriate introductions oftentimes include connections, your family connections to place. And so Ryan and I also have family connections to Tumwata Village. We're both married to Grand Ronde tribal members, and those tribal members are descendant of Joseph Shangretta, who signed the Willamette Valley Treaty of 1855, which is the treaty that is inclusive of Oregon City's boundaries. So Joseph spent a lot of time at Tumwata, and so that's our connection to this place. So, and with that, I think probably just starting into the presentation. So let's see. Sorry, I'm getting myself coordinated here. So as Tony had said, the tribe purchased the property in 2019. We went through an initial visioning process, sort of Vision 1.0, which you can find on the tumwatavillage.org website. And that was completed in March 2021. And what we're presenting today is a refinement of that original vision plan, and it's adding sort of additional detail, talking about square footage, parking, building layout, utilities, really providing that additional layer of detail. And so it really sets the stage for redevelopment on site, and is meant for, the tribe and tribal members, the public, the funders, and really the intent is to really give people a good understanding of what we want to do on site. The logo in the upper left-hand corner, the Tumwata Village logo, was designed and is reflective of the petroglyphs that can be found at the falls themselves. So consistent with imagery of this place and invoking the history of this place. It's also Tumwata Village. I like to call out and note that it is intended to be lowercase. It's consistent with the Chinakwawa language, which is the tribal language of the people of this place, the trade language. And so Tumwata meaning generally Oregon City as a place, but intentionally left as lowercase to be consistent with the language. So, yeah, okay. There we go. Okay, so the image on the right is one of those items that got pulled forward from that original vision document. And this circle diagram really is highlighting the effort that was done by Tribal Council following purchase of the property, and the intention is that it captures the tribe's values and goal for redevelopment on the site. So the goal is healing on site and really embodying healing through the tribal values of spirit, place, prosperity, and people. And so we go back to this diagram sort of on a regular basis, every decision that we make when it comes from a design perspective to ensure that it's consistent with the values that were identified and put forth by our tribal council. All right, so the next section is really talking about the tribal people of this place. The map there on the left shows all of the treaties that were signed by the people who were eventually removed to the Grand Ronde Indian Reservation. So in dark green, you can see sort of the 14 million acre footprint, and Tumwata Village up there at the top, as I noted, was part of the Willamette Valley Treaty of 1855, and that treaty was signed by several tribal leaders, but certainly the tribal leaders of the Clackamas and the Claliwala people that were near Tumwata. And so the nearby neighbors, the Multnomah, the Kalapuya, the Malala, and the Cascades also signed that treaty. And then some of the imagery you can see there on the left, on the right, the bottom left, you can see the image shows harvesting lamprey at the falls. We say Skakwil. And then that upper right is Tamanoas, probably better known to many as the Willamette meteorite, but it's located in New York City. And so just some imagery connecting the people of this place. So the importance of the site to the tribe. You can see in the foreground Tumwata Village and its proximate location to other tribal villages of this place. So Tumwata Village in the foreground is a 23-acre site that the tribe purchased. And then you can see across the river on the westland side, the Chirkawa Village, which is inclusive of the Claliwala people, the Willamette band of the Tumwatas. I always get that stuck in my mouth. And then the bean shape there on the right-hand side of that image is the village of Kazakshik, which is a Clackamas village. And so just kind of the importance of this place for the tribe and the opportunity to purchase Tumwata and really reclaim a culturally important site for the tribe and have it being proximate to other village sites. The images there on the right, you can see sort of an existing condition, really sort of a hard industrialized landscape, and then future conditions showing a lot smaller footprint when it comes to buildings and an overall green of the site. And Ryan will talk a lot more about that sort of on the second half of this presentation. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this slide talking about a variety of things. So bear with me, we'll be here for a moment. But this image is really important because it shows sort of the tribe's connection to place over time. And so you'll often hear tribal people say, we've been here since time immemorial. And sort of what does that mean? And what it means is we've been here from a time that no one can remember. And we know, though, through tribal stories, the A.Commissioner, the creation stories, that the tribes have been here at least from the time of the Missoula floods. We talk about the Great Floods. We have A.Commissioner stories of the Great Floods. And so the Missoula floods happened 13 to 18,000 years ago. And we think about that contextually, it's hard to understand, right? We think about it, that time period being roughly 500 generations of Grand Ronde people living in this place, passing down A.Commissioner from generation to generation. And so really the Grand Ronde tribe has a deep connection to tumwata, to this place. And we really look at that sort of in juxtaposition to this period of persistence, which is, roughly 1820 to 2011, 6 to 7 generations. And it's really not that one period of time is more important than the other, but that they are additive to each other. And so one of the things that you'll see sort of with the upcoming master plan amendment is we are really broadening the scale of the history and understanding the history on this site. The original Willamette Falls Legacy Project master plan really focused on that period of persistence. And with the tribe's ownership of this property, our hope is to really broaden that understanding of history and tell a much deeper and more robust history of this site. And so we have done a lot of understanding of that history as land stewards. It's sort of our role and responsibility is building partnerships and relationships with other people that have moved through this site over time. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those partnerships that the tribe has been pursuing since we've purchased the property. And just so that you have a little bit better understanding of sort of the tribe's commitment to understanding all of the different people that move through this place. So one of those projects that we are in partnership with is the Chinese Diaspora Project. So that project is being run out of Southern Oregon University by archaeologist Chelsea Rose. And the tribe has a contract with the Chinese Diaspora Project to do a lot of research specific to the Chinese community that was on the tumwata village site. And we are doing that preemptively because we know at some point in time we will do redevelopment, there will be ground disturbance, and there is the possibility that there could be items found, and wanting to ensure that we have good contextual understanding of those items and relationships to those communities so those stories can be told. One of the other partnerships that we've really developed is the partnership with the Oregon Black Pioneers and really ensuring that we're telling Jacob Vanderpool's story on site. There's been here on social media between the tribe and the Oregon Black Pioneers, we try to do a lot of cross-posting around sort of Juneteenth and cross-posting around Oregon's exclusion laws and just having a better overall understanding of that period of time and being able to tell that story on site as well. We also know that there was a Kanaka or Hawaiian vocational school on site in the 1850s, and so the tribe is working with that community to also build relationships and build partnerships so that at such a point in time that it makes sense to tell that story on site, we have those relationships, and it can be done from a very authentic place of relationality. So two other exciting collaborations are with some of our local universities. So the tribe, when we purchased the property, got in partnership with Oregon State Geomatics Engineering Program, which is a really awesome program, and if you don't know about it, you should totally look it up. They just had an NPR article that was about, I'm forgetting the name of the building at this point in time, but they are doing, they're sort of at the forefront of survey and LiDAR technology sort of across the US. And so when we bought this property, we develop a partnership, and they are doing a tremendous amount of scanning on site and are doing it on a very regular basis. And it was something that was rolled out this fall at the Tribes History and Culture Summit. You can actually put on sort of a VR headset and actually walk through the site, and you can walk through it over time as buildings have come down and see what that is. And so there's a large 3D model. It's been something that has been a really collaborative effort, helping their students become sort of at the forefront of that technology, and the tribe also benefiting from that relationship, having a tremendous amount of knowledge about the buildings on site and the change over time. So, and then the other relationship is with Willamette University. There's a professor, Dr. Scott Pike, whose research area is around bricks, and he does a lot of material science research. And as you can imagine, this site has a lot of bricks from a lot of different places. Bricks came in as ballast on a lot of the different ships, and so they have done material collection of samples and are doing material science analysis and figuring out where those bricks are coming and really helping to tell the story of global trade happening. And we're in partnership and continue to support that research and with his students to ensure that we can tell that story on site. There's also a lot of engagement with our tribal council, with different committees and boards in this community, and all of that is part of healing the site and healing the relationships. We know that there's harm that has happened in this place over time, and it takes healing of both the land and the relationships to move this project forward in a good way. And so all of these relationships are really important in that regard. So.
And I do want to just kind of add on to that and say that you'll see with this, Vision 2.0 document and our forthcoming land use that we are definitely trying to zoom out that kind of history lens on the site. And it's not to zoom it out that it takes away from that industrial focus and shifts it to the tribal people of place. It's really zooming it out and being able to tell stories of every person that has had an impact or a connection to that site, and making sure that there's opportunity for them to have that connection back to the site as well. And so, we have done a lot of work, tried to, establishing, maintaining those relationships, making sure that we have a much better understanding of the site, not just from the tribe's own historical and cultural connection, but knowing that there were many people that have defined that site and being able to shape it. And so being able to really tell the story for all there, that has really been a key piece. And you'll see that in this document and our kind of land use as well. And that really is exciting. With those relationships, there's been some great things that have come from that, and it's really been helped to shape what we're hoping to do on the site as well.
So this next, we start talking about sort of what private redevelopment looks like on site, and really the focus for us is sort of integration of cultural identity is going to be a really important theme of private development on site. And so integration of cultural identity when it comes to public spaces and buildings and infrastructure, we talk about things like door handles and transoms above the doors and paver designs and sidewalks and integration of native plant materials, and really taking utilitarian objects that are utilitarian in nature but making them reflect cultural identity. And so that concept is really consistent with the tribal teaching of keeping it living, and you'll hear tribal people say, it's like a keeping it living approach. And it's really about art, design, and utility are not intended to be done once, but are continued to be done continually. And it's an ongoing interaction with those elements, sort of reflection and refinement over time. And so one of the items I like to talk about as sort of an example of that, because it's sort of maybe an idea that's a little bit different, is the image there on the left, which is of Wapato Woman. And so Wapato Woman is a sculpture, it's a piece of artwork that was done by Travis Stewart, who is a Grand Ronde tribal member, and it's actually located in the Rood Bridge Park in Hillsborough, if you're interested in going and checking it out. But it tells a story of sort of the keeping it living approach. The face is carved cedar. I think at one point in time, the entire piece could have been a carved cedar, but we know that cedar is a limited resource, right? So it's reflecting sort of that change, that iteration of material sources over time. So the face is carved, and it's an outside installation. So we know that eventually that face will deteriorate over time, and there will be a need to recarve Wapato Woman's face, which means that there is a cultural commitment that we will have Grand Ronde carvers for generation that will interact and can recarve Wapato woman's face and reimagine her sort of over generations. And so that's really, I think, an approach that the tribe is taking with this site, is that it's not ever meant to be done once, but it's meant to be done continually and interacted with. So tumwata Village, kind of what is it? You know, it's a modern tribal village. It's a mixed-use development. It's inclusive of open spaces and retail and shopping and offices and hotel and event space. You've got some images on the right that evoke some of those activities. So active open spaces for farmers markets, spaces throughout for cultural activities. So you see a fish pit in the front there, and then really connecting of the water back to the land, knowing that at one point in time water flowed over this site before there was the dam, and so ensuring that there is water back on site is really important for the tribe. And so the intention of Tumwata Village is that it is a place where the obligations and responsibilities to plants and animals and people are really seen and felt by the people who move through this space. And the goal is that it becomes a model for others, and that it really reflects the tribe's values and puts those values into action. And so this is sort of our stopping point between Ryan and I. We're going to use this moment to give a couple updates about activities that are happening on site before we dive into sort of on-site redevelopment. One of the things that I just wanted to highlight for you all was the internal roadway network on site. So one of the items that we're really proud of that happened last year was we were able to get the internal roadway network on the regional transportation plan as a project. The tribe is a sponsoring entity for that project, and so that helps us tremendously. It aligns with our own transportation plans, and it sets us up really well for federal funding to fund the street and utility infrastructure on site. So the tribe, you know, has access to different monies that are available to cities and counties, and our hope is to be able to sort of use that project being on the tribe's transportation plan and the regional transportation plan to be able to secure funding to build out the rest of the roadway networks. So.
Yeah, thank you. And kind of building on that, Kristen did touch on it, but we also went through an exercise last year and beginning part of this year to add this street network onto our own tribal transportation program. And so that allows us to access dollars that we get through BIA as it relates to building infrastructure and utilities as well. And so you know, the combination of being on Metro's RTP, our own tribal transportation plan, we really feel that's some great positive steps forward to be able to really reach out to the amount of federal funding there today to put a strong case forward to get funding to build out the street network on site, which is really exciting. You know, talking about street networks on site, I think if people weren't aware, we were fortunate to get some congressional funding back. I think it was in 2021 or 22, and that funding was to help us to design and construct really what we're calling the first phase of infrastructure and utilities on site. And so that is kind of setting up what we're labeling as Block 1, which is really the kind of the northern west corner of the site, really to your bottom left of that picture, and it is basically creating the first block, which will be Water Avenue off 99E at the elbow to 4th Street, 4th Street up to Main, and then Main back out to 99E. And so we are currently actively, we hired David Evans and Associates to help us with that design work, and we're in the midst of designing that first phase of infrastructure. And our hope and plan, our plan is to, once our land use decision has been rendered, to be able to come in for permits for that work, and then really kind of move right into construction. And so it's really amazing to be talking about new construction on this site. You know, we've spoken, I mean, you guys are familiar, but, you know, even in our, you know, short time of owning the site, you know, we spent a lot of time when it comes to environmental remediation work, demolition, right, tearing things down. And so to have conversations and actually be doing work where there is new construction going onto this site is really exciting. And so that's been a great body of work, and like I said, it's really setting up, and I really think it will be a great catalyst for ultimately redevelopment of that first block there on site as well. I did want to take this opportunity. I think it's been a while since we provided an update to Commission on what's been happening on the site the last couple of years. So again, you drive past it a lot, you'll see that there's been a lot more demolition work that we were able to complete last year in 2023. We took down a complex of buildings that was probably about 9 or 10, but they're all kind of lumped together as one. So that was really exciting to take those down. In the midst of that complex of buildings was the old flour mill foundation. So we did a lot of work to kind of protect and preserve that. We had monitors, archaeological monitors on site to help make sure that the demo contractors were being safe and protecting that stuff as much as possible. So that was a really great piece of work to complete in 2023. We have we've been working with the city for the next kind of phase of demo. That next building would be the administration building that is up front and center. And so the city was able to submit permits to us, I think it was last week or the week before. That was really exciting. We're just waiting for PGE to disconnect power from that building. And so we're looking at the end of the month to start demolition of that building. So again, another, I think, big transformation that we'll see coming really soon to the site as well. So that's exciting. In terms of environmental remediation work, we got a lot of work done in 2023. A big body of work that we were able to complete was some subsurface investigation work. So we did over 200 borings throughout the site, and really the purpose of that work was to be able to quantify and locate contamination that's in those subsurface soils. So we did know just from activities that occurred at the mill where contamination may be. What we didn't know is that the only contamination? Was there other stuff? Or had that contamination in fact leached through the soils throughout the site? So really, that was a good body of work to complete. We are now working on taking that data and then figuring out next steps when it comes to actual cleanup activities. And so whether that is a case of excavating out all of that contaminated material and putting clean fill back, or a case of kind of capping it in place and then building up from there. So that we'll be working with EPA and DEQ this year to set forth what that actual remediation plan will be as well. Another body of work related to environmental remediation that we got done last year was work related to underground storage tanks. So there was numerous underground storage tanks, USTs they call them, throughout the site that were held many different chemicals for whatever processes needed for the various different mills. So we did a big exercise to locate them. We knew that there were some out there, but we didn't know necessarily where they all were. So we did a lot of work related to ground penetrating radar to try and find them. Once that worked, we then had to excavate and find them and test the material inside those USTs. And then we spent last year kind of removing those USTs and doing remediation work around that. And one thing that I think highlights the challenges and complexities to this site is an interesting story. So I spoke to many of the old mill workers that worked here, and it was a story that always came back from many different sources that there was a locomotive buried at this site. And as crazy as that sounds, it wasn't that crazy. So when we were locating some of these USTs, we uncovered what was actually 2 railroad tankers that they buried in the ground and used as underground storage tanks.
Wow.
Now I am crossing everything that is the locomotive that was spoken about, and there still isn't a locomotive out there, but that just kind of highlights the complexities that we're dealing with when it comes to this site, and it throws curveballs almost daily. And so we were able to like I say, pull those out of the ground, remediate the ground around them, but it just kind of highlights, I guess, some of those MacGyvers that were building things out there and how they went about their business. So again, I think, just wanted to kind of provide those updates about what we've been able to do last year. We have got a lot more work going on this year outside of things related to the land use, just kind of cleanup activities on the site as well. So we kind of intentionally provided those updates to leave this image up on the screen for longer so everybody could take a look at it. But this is our really kind of taking what we did in the original vision document, which was a lot more sketches, and really taking it and putting hard lines on paper. And so we mentioned about reestablishing the street network that was out there. And so you can see here, there's kind of a figure of 8 street network that, like I said, takes you off 99E to Water, to 4th Street, to Main, and then you can go 4th Street up to Railroad Avenue that goes back to 3rd and Main and out. And so it's creating that infrastructure where the infrastructure and utilities that will then serve the different blocks of redevelopment. And so from kind of north from the site to south or left or right on your screen, as you see here, there's been a lot of intentionality around your transition and how you come into the site and transition through the site. With, downtown Oregon City, it's very much a lot of buildings, right away, and really what you can see, what we're looking to do here is a lot of the buildings and the concentration of buildings is more at the northern end adjacent to Oregon City, and then as you move south throughout the site, it becomes a lot more open space and naturalization of the property, all the way to get down to that natural area, which is the falls. And there's a lot of intentionality to that to really allow that transition to happen as you move through the site. Things that I will just highlight here as we're looking at it. I mentioned Block 1 as the kind of the first phase of potential redevelopment after we've kind of constructed the infrastructure and utilities for it. On that, you can see there's, like I said, it's the northwest block to the left of your screen. There's 2 buildings on that block. And we're looking, we're still confirming programming, but it's likely that we will look at residential. One of the buildings will be residential units, and the other building will be kind of ground floor retail, office space, and a potential event center above that. And then you can see just to the north of the side of it, has it got a pointer?
I think it does.
Okay. I know. I don't think it works on the screen, but it's okay. To the east of Block 1, we're calling Block 5, and it's just kind of to the north of your screen there. That is a structured parking. We understand, I think you're very familiar with the parking constraints that you have in your downtown core. And obviously with the development we have on there, we need to make sure that we're providing adequate parking for the development activities that we're doing on here. And so not only will there be on-street parking on the streets there, but we realize that at some point we're going to have to build a parking structure to serve all of that development there. And so it provides really a good location in terms of, right there you're at the corner of 99E and the railroad, right? You think of all of those noise generation things that happen there, and with the fact that you've also got the bluff behind them, all that noise comes up from 99E, from the railroad, it bounces off the bluff, and it goes straight back into our site. And so we've been very thoughtful about what kind of structures we can put along the railroad there to make sure that when you're on the site, you're along the river's edge, you're really having a good experience. You're not having to constantly listen to a train roll by or cars and trucks as they're on 99E as well. And so as you really move south through the site, in Block 2, which is south of Block 1, there's another building there will be another residential, looking to be a residential building. Next to it is really where the old flour mill foundations are. And so that again is a piece of history that we want to highlight to people as they're coming to the site. we're not sure how we highlight it, what we do around it to really provide that kind of interactive measure there, but it's something that we do really want to incorporate into the open space and to the site as well. In that same block, there is, and we'll see some kind of renderings that show it a little bit better, but there's space, big kind of open space there for gathering. And so, again, we'll see in this vision document, but also with our upcoming land use, is that we want to make sure that public access and open space happens throughout the site. It's not just one area, but it gives people the opportunity to meander through the site, and every time they come back, they've got another potential location that they can stop and enjoy the site. And so there's lots of open spaces, lots of opportunity for public gathering spaces to happen throughout the site as opposed to just one location, and really giving people different opportunities, different experiences for every time they come into the site as well. And we've been, again, very intentional about making sure that there is lots of space for the public to really enjoy the site, and whether it is along the river's edge, down by the falls, or even just kind of smack bang in the middle of the site as well. Just kind of south of that, there's a building that really is sticking out close to the water's edge there. If people are familiar with the site, that really footprint today is what was called Mill O. We're looking here for a potential kind of boutique hotel location to give you fantastic views, both upstream and downstream of the river, of the falls and the arch bridge. And again, a really great location for people to come and stay and enjoy the site. As you continue to kind of follow the river's edge and move south, this is where we kind of really get to the drastic changes to the site. So today, where you can see a river channel in there today, that is all fill in that area. It is all flat, buildable space that they just continue to put fill in so they can make a flat spout and then build a building on it. And so for us, this is where we really get to the focus of healing and restoring of the site. And part of that is, again, bringing water back into the site and allowing those historical river channels to be reestablished. And really kind of showing the basalt, bringing back native vegetation along the shoreline and things like that, which is really exciting for us. On the other side, on the eastern side of the property, you can see some buildings along there that are south of the parking structure. We're kind of really labeling that as more flex building spaces as we start to redevelop, as we start to see what the needs are potentially out here for the community. These buildings have got the ability to be able to shift to see, depending on what the community or the neighborhoods or the people need from this site, whether that is potentially more residential units, whether it's or ground floor retail, office space, whatever the need may come of it, there's got flexibility there to be sure that we can provide it on this site as well. And then as you get really down to the southern end by the lagoon, this is again some real changes where we're bringing back the kind of naturalization of the bank line. Again, today, if you're familiar, it's a lot of hardscape, old building foundations, and really kind of removing that hardscape and renaturalizing the bank. And it's a really beautiful place to have that connection back to the water as well. Again, it's got the potential to kind of put in a plank house here, have the ability to kind of practice have cultural practice here, have tribal events, again, kind of allowing the community and people back to this area as well. This is a little bit more kind of zoomed in on the northern half of the property, so you don't have to kind of squint so hard. But again, this is really, on the northern half, you can see that there's a higher concentration of buildings. And again, that's intentional as you move from downtown, which has got a high concentration of buildings. We've kind of intentionally put them on the north side, and then you move further south, really to more of the naturalization, green, open spaces. One thing that I did want to kind of call out, where there's the number one adjacent to the parking structure, right here we're looking to do an open space to help with more of a green gateway into the site. And we'll see a better photo and a rendering and a couple more slides, but for us, I just wanted to call on it because it gets to the point that I made about intentional open spaces throughout the site. And so this piece here is it's 60 feet wide, and it's parallel to what will be the streets and the sidewalks, but it's an additional 60-foot wide open space that will allow you to meander through the site, take a stop there, benches, place you can sit, enjoy the site. Again, intentional gathering spaces for the public as they move through the site. And again, I'll talk about the kind of the gateway moment, but this really allows us to kind of let you know that you're coming onto the site, and this is a different environment to the downtown city area as well. I kind of already spoke about, if you look at 7, that's an open space. What I do want to call is, if you look at number 6, that is again where we are trying to naturalize and reestablish native vegetation along the shoreline. Today, that is again a lot of hardscape. It was the old paper machine number 3, I think it was, as well as kind of the Mill D building. So there's a building foundation, a lot of concrete there. Again, it's bringing back, so you can see that basalt, bringing back native vegetation along the shoreline as well. Number 5, which is kind of to the top right of your screen, you'll see right there. That is the potential location for an elevator. So we know in Oregon City's TSP, there's calls out for an elevator structure to take people down from this site up and over the bluff into the McLaughlin neighborhood. And so we have made sure that any public project that is kind of out there, that making sure that the work that we're doing this site doesn't prohibit it. So that elevator structure that's within your TSP, it's kind of called out for a location there. They'll take you ultimately up onto 3rd Street on the up above the bluff there. Another one that I do is we're talking about kind of public projects. The West Lynn, Oregon City Pet Bike Bridge, right? So the north half of our property was one of the corridors or alignments that they called out in that work that ODOT did. And so we've made it, done a lot of work to make sure that if that is the chosen alignment, the work we're doing doesn't prohibit that connection to the site. And so it would connect somewhere along Water Avenue between 99E and kind of 4th Street is really that corridor, that window that they proposed. And then the other one there is the public Riverwalk project, right? And so again, the phase 1 that was approved by the partnership back a few years ago was basically would take you from 99E along Water Avenue and then launch at that corner of 4th Street and Water and take you ultimately down to where we're showing a hotel, but what is Mill O today. And so, again, we've done work, made sure we've done work that we can accommodate those public projects. And again, making sure that it really provides better connections for all into this site, whether it's if you're coming, if you come from West Lynn and want to come to the site, if you're coming from the neighborhoods up at the top of the bluff down to the site, or again, if you want to enjoy that river walk, it's making sure that the work we've done accommodates all of those different public projects. And anything we can do to continue to support those is something we definitely will be pursuing and interested in as well. And I just want to, call out, you can see a lot, even along the street network, there's a lot of street trees, a lot of greenery, a lot of shrubbery, and again, that's very intentional about bringing back native vegetation, whether it's shrubs, trees, plants, whatever it is, back into the site and really kind of greening up that site, because that is part of how we heal and restore this land. And then we move down to more the southern half of the site. And again, I think you can really see the change from where you saw a lot more buildings on the northern half. Now there's fewer buildings and it's a lot more vegetation. It's a lot more river channels and a lot more of the basalt throughout the site here. Again, I kind of already called out, but number 3 is potential location for a hotel. Number 2 is the old Wooler Mill foundations, and so just like the Fowl Mill foundations, they've got a real historical connection to the site, and so ways that we can preserve it and integrate that into the site for people to explore and to really kind of interact with that is definitely an intention of the tribes as well. 6, I kind of spoke about it, is a real stark difference from today, where it's kind of taken out that fill and bringing back the basalt so you can really see, given a place for marine life to really kind of maybe get out the main river channel and have take a break, relax, and a place for them to, before they can try to continue to go upriver. The lagoon area, number kind of 8 and 9, again, that is a really naturalization of that shoreline there today, and a location for a plank house for the tribe to do cultural practice as well. There's other buildings, again, on the eastern half, on the north side of your imagery here. But again, that is what we're really calling it is kind of flex building space. As we start redevelopment and we start hearing from the community about what the needs are they have in this site, that will ultimately help us kind of figure out what best fits into those buildings as well. But I really like this site because it really shows you the kind of what the restoration really piece is on for this site. And so, this really isn't your typical urban development where we're trying to maximize square footage and buildable land on here. The key focus that has really come from our tribal council is that healing and restoring this land is a priority, and that's coupled with kind of public access to the site as well. And so what I really like about this is the green highlights where we plan to do a lot of restoration work on the site, whether it's on the shoreline, whether it's river channels, whether it's kind of bringing back, trees, shrubs, plants, really along the shoreline as you then continue all the way south to the bottom end of our property. And really, I think you can see from this, it really is more of a 50-50 split. And so for us, that really highlights the work that we want to do on this site is that is a top priority for us. And then obviously, we're looking to how we can develop it as well. And so I really like this imagery because it really just gives you really shows you the focus of what the tribe has here when it comes to restoration work. So here, this is really kind of, again, talking about the different types of buildings that will be potentially on the site and really kind of giving you square footages of those different buildings. And so block 1, like I said, is up in the more the northwest corner of the property. I mentioned that the potential for a residential building and then building with ground floor retail, office space, event center. Block 2 has a building on it that's, again, more residential space, residential units. Block 3 has the hotel there. Block 4 is just restoration work, right? There's no buildings going on there. It's purely just restoration, as well as Block 10. And then you've got Block 5 is the parking structure. 6, 7, again, we've kind of labeled it here as flex buildings, but whatever the market demands, whatever the city, the community's needs are, those buildings have got the ability to try and match that need and help out the communities. And then you've got 8, 9, with 9 being kind of the tribal building, but a plank house down there, really having that connection to the water as well. So this really kind of gives you ultimately what we're looking at as development square footage, as well as the parking structure there as well. And again, if knowing how big the site is, this really, our focus isn't maximizing development. It's has development, but maximizing restoration work here. Okay, these are the exciting pieces because this is really kind of the renderings that show you the difference that we're planning for the site. And so this one here, front and center, is really if you're standing on Main Street, looking south, that's the intersection with 99E there. So you're kind of more in the downtown city core, looking into the site. And so I mentioned before that this is your gateway moment into the site. And our really what we want to define the gateway moment really is that green gateway. It's showing that you've got a lot of vegetation, a lot of trees there, really greening up the site, as that's all part of the heating process. And so the building to the right of the image there is what I mentioned about, the building that have office space, event center. You've got two kind of residential buildings in the background there. And then again on the left side of that image, you've got that kind of open space that's parallel to the street, allowing people to really kind of get off the sidewalk and adjacent to the street and kind of be able to use that to meander through the site as well. And then you can kind of see the top of it, but that's the parking structure that's really kind of nestled away in the corner there by 99E and the railroad. But you can see kind of some befores that as we stand there today, what it looks like you stand there today with the administration building that's up there, and then this change for this gateway moment on the site. This one is here if you're more in the middle of the site, looking towards the river. This is one of the, again, open spaces for the site. This is right around block 2. So you can't quite see it, but just to the right of the image is really the corner of that residential building. In the center there, you've got the old flour mill foundation. So again, our intent is to really include that into this open space, make it something that people can go look at, maybe interact with, really understand some history to the site as well. In the background, really kind of standing tall is the hotel. Again, I think you can see what views you would have both up and downstream of the falls and the arch bridge, which again, a great place for people to come and stay and to continue to enjoy the site as well. And again, if you look at some of the images to the left of your screen, it really shows what it was like when it was kind of first industrialized, what it's like today with all the buildings on site, and then you can really sort of see the difference of that opening the space up and allowing the public back in. This for me is one of the stark differences from today into what we want to do with the site. So this is block 4 where I mentioned about kind of removing the fill and reestablishing the river channel. So this is close if you're kind of more towards PGE's dam looking north onto the site. Like I say, today it is just a flat concrete space. And this is taking out all that fill and allowing the water to come back into that river channel. Just in the background, you can see the old basalt foundations of the Woolen Mill. So really kind of opening that up to really see those foundations and how beautiful those are. And again, making sure that they're integrated into the site as well. Again, in the background there, that's the hotel. Again, it just kind of highlights the views that you're going to have up and down the river as well. And then this one is really as you stand at the southern part of the site looking north. You've got the lagoon here. Today if you look at the image to the bottom left there, you can kind of see what it looks like today. It's a old concrete foundation of what was a building there, but it is removing a lot of that concrete, that hardscape, re-establishing the naturalization of the shoreline, and you can really then see that connection back to the water. Again, bringing back native vegetation, and hopefully with that native vegetation comes wildlife, both marine and wildfowl as well. And then again, you can kind of see in the background next to the lagoon there as a plank house, a place to be able to do cultural practice as well. And again, it just, seeing those images of when it was first industrialized to where it is today to this, it really kind of drives home the focus of restoration that we want to put on this site as well. And I think with that is the kind of the end of our presentation for Vision 2.0 and ultimately what we'll see coming up with our land use application.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the presentation. I know that we have all been very eager to hear about this. Before we begin on discussion and Q&A, I'd like, if my colleagues are okay, to recognize our friends on the Tribal Council and invite them up if they would like to join us around the table. If you would like to join us in the discussion, there's no need to if you don't want to, but just wanted to extend that invitation to our Tribal Council friends. So. Just wherever, please take a seat. And if you could introduce yourselves for the record, too.
My name is Denise Harvey, Tribal Council for the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde.
Alush Laksan, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kathleen George with Tribal Council. It's wonderful to be here tonight.
Shlush Laksan, John George Nikaneem, Confederate Tribes of Grand Ronde, Tribal Council members. Thank you, Ayumasi, for having us.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have questions, discussion? Yes, please, Commissioner O'Donnell.
So most of my questions are going to direct toward Brian. Okay. I'm glad to hear that you're working in coordination with the Riverwalk project, and that's good to hear. Are you aware of what we call the 99E improvement project? Probably not, and that's something you should take a look at.
I might be, and maybe I'll tell you what I think it is, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. But I believe it to be the work that you guys are doing for creating a multi-use path along 99, the 10th to the tunnel project. Is that correct?
That's essentially correct. We had a good presentation on it. If you can get your hands on it, I think it's very complementary to what you want to do. But take a look at it. I think it would behoove you to do that.
Yeah, what I'll tell you is that we've had quite a few meetings with Kittleson, who's the consultant doing that work for you guys, with DEA, who's doing our work, as well as ODOT and some of your city staff, kind of talking about how that project will kind of connect into our site and making sure that we can we can accommodate it with the work. And I think the projects will complement each other perfectly and really provide such better access for the public.
You mentioned residential a couple times. Is that transient or long-term, or for tribal members only, or staff? What residential function would that perform?
I think, we, as part of that work, we will look at what the market need is here for the city. And so if that is everything related to market rate, affordable housing, we will definitely obviously be looking to, if we've got tribal members that live, and we do know we've got tribal members that live in the Portland metro area, if there's housing needs that they have, to make sure that with this type of work that we're helping them. But it's not just for tribal members, it's really for this community as well.
And you mentioned hotels a number of times. Are you aware of our pursuit of a quiet zone? And perhaps that would have benefit to your hotel residents and your site, and maybe you'd care to participate in that, or at least support it?
Yeah, I think we would definitely, that would benefit, a quiet zone would definitely benefit our project, just with the frequency of both Amtrak and freight that goes through that, along those lines there. We did have conversations with ODOT Rail probably a year ago, as they were looking to reactivate one of the sidings along here, because there are issues with delays to Amtrak. And so anything that we can do to support you guys for pursuit of that quiet zone, or anything we can do to support that, we definitely were willing.
Well, we don't want anybody reliving my cousin Vinny while they're staying at your hotel, so if we could keep it quieter there, and you want to participate in that, your assistance and support would be welcome. And then I think, other than that, for Kristen, you mentioned the different ethnic communities that were participants there. I'd like to at least get your card or something. I have a Chinese friend, doctor, and he may be part of that group you mentioned, and I couldn't make out who it was, but I'd like him to get in contact with you, because they're doing some independent work. And I think you would be mutually supportive, because he'd like to know the role of the Chinese community and their role in Oregon City. And I didn't realize they were in residence at Tumwata.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, that's an incredible piece of information. And they've got a group working, and I think the two of you together, if you're not already aware of each other, should be.
Yeah, definitely we can exchange contact information and make sure that those connections are made. So.
Well, it's an auspicious project, and it's your chance to put your mark upon the land. It's a lifetime project, and I wish you well with it because it's incredible.
Thank you.
So thank you. I'm done.
Any other comments? Yes.
First, thank you for being here, and thank you for this. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of pent-up interest in the community. So I guess my question is, are these slides available on your website, or will they be soon so that we can let our community members know that they can see what the plans are?
Yeah, I think they will be soon. I think our process is to get our land use application in and then put it all out for everybody to view. So our intent is to get them out to our website and share it with the world.
Great. Obviously, there's a lot of interest. You touched on it a couple of times, and one of the biggest challenges is going to be safely moving pedestrians off of that site and onto Main Street and the rest of downtown. So I was pleased to see you mentioned of an elevator. That could be terrific. But obviously that's going to be a challenge, especially that being a freight route right through the middle. I guess my last question is, do you envision this, obviously this is going to be a multi-year project, do you envision it developing in phases to where portions of it could be open to the public while you're still working on other areas of the site?
Yeah, I think that's exactly that, especially, I spoke about kind of phase one of infrastructure and utility, and I think our hope is to create, to build that out, but obviously make the rest of the site safe that people can't access where we still got buildings potentially still up there. But as we continue to get that street network in, as we continue to develop it, it's kind of making more and more of the site available to the public to be able to access it. So the answer is yes, it will be, it will be done in phases just because of the sheer size of this type of project. But our intent is to very much to continue to, as we develop it, is to be allowing the public to be accessing it in a safe manner.
Great. Thanks again for being here.
Commissioner Smith.
I have a lot to say, but I'm not going to say it all. It's so exciting to just have, I could have sat here and listened to this for another 5 hours. We're not going to, but we've all been waiting so long to see this, and have worked on, various aspects of this place for so long. And to see the buildings coming, I think it's really going to be a shock when that administration building comes down this month, because I was like, oh my gosh, that's happening. Because it will shock people. That's a good thing, because it's going to be like, it's happening. It will. So many people have not gone to the Bluff to see the changes on that site, and so they're not seeing it. The second that building comes down and everyone can see all the way through that site, I think it's going to be real. And I won't go into the details of the plan. I think it's very much what a lot of us have, is consistent with what we've talked about in the past. I think there's nothing shocking in that. I think it's conducive to what this community wants and is envisioned. I think the place that really I want to focus on talking about or commenting on is my appreciation for the research and the history. It's probably not been, I worked at the End of the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center in high school, and I'm still now on the board with John George on the End of the Oregon Trail, but to see the evolution of the stories that this city is telling, because I think for me, I've probably been spending the last 5 or 10 years, and now that seems like not enough, but compared to where we were in the 90s to where we are now, the last 5 or 10 years I've been entrenched in researching the Chinese history, the native history of this town, the Black Pioneer history. We've been talking about that extensively at the End of the Oregon Trail. I had heard the railroad stories, the train stories for a long time. to know that there's, you know, these stories that we hear for so long and see that they're real. The history and the legends on that site are incredible. And, you know, yes, not all those stories are going to be physical structures on that site, but the ability to have that openness and space to walk that land and to be able to reference the however many hundreds of layers of history is on that site. I think it's fascinating, and I'm so happy that that conversation is happening and it's so intertwined into this concept. This town needs it, and we, you know, have told such limited stories for so long. And there's so many amazing stories about this town. I wish I would have grown up knowing them all. I'm glad I'm catching up. So thank you for your work in that, and it's exciting.
Thank you.
Was someone gonna? Okay. I'll just close this out here. My questions have already been asked, but I do two things of note that I really appreciate seeing in this presentation. One is the residential aspect. One thing that I'm talking about over and over is how our mixed-use downtown area really isn't a mixed-use downtown area because there isn't residential. And the aspect of having people there around the clock is going to be such a great asset to our businesses that are existing, as well as to the vision that you all see for that site. And so I'm really excited about that. The other part is the emphasis on open space and restoration. I think a lot of people, they see how Oregon City is growing, a lot of which we don't have a lot of control over, and we see a lot of maximized density that is a big change for people. And so I think in this community, having a development that really has an emphasis on open spaces and public spaces is a really refreshing outlook for residents of Oregon City, and we really, really appreciate that. I'll just close by saying that there is a lot in this community that divides our residents. We've got our own controversies that are always going on, as small cities often do. But this is one of those areas where, regardless of where anyone is, everyone is so excited about the potential for this redevelopment and for this restoration. And so we're very grateful that you all took the time to come out and give this presentation to us. We're looking forward to following the process as it moves through land use, and hopefully making sure that our residents are aware of, like Commissioner Smith said, how much work has actually gone into it just to this date, which I don't think a lot of people are aware. So with that, if there are no other questions or comments, thank you again. Oh, Commissioner.
I'm sorry, I do have a couple comments. I got so focused into my history, like fog. One thing that has brought up, looking at that, the main thing that scares a lot of us, I think, in looking at that gateway is that crossing, right? The crossing between Main Street and 99E. And I think part of the way that you're envisioning that entryway will entice people to make that crossing, which is not a crossing people would be enticed to make at this point. But I don't know how realistic, you know, the elevator or connections from the bluff will be. I hope that is a possibility. I think that's definitely something to look at and think about, especially if you have a parking garage that's almost reaching that ledge, and could that be a connection? Another connection I think we should think about, or you should think about, is the tunnel itself. So there is the pedestrian walkway that's not the most attractive place to walk, but if you walk into the side of the tunnel, it takes you up over the tunnel, and there's a really horrible, sidewalk that is about this narrow that I would not want any of you to ever walk, because I've tried it once. It's scary. If that pathway along 99E somehow was able to connect with the site, or even farther up connect with the trail to Kanema, I think there's opportunities where the grade might be in a place where some connections could be made from 9090 to the Clackamas, to the trail that's going out towards Kaniba to connect some spaces in that site. So I don't want to overlook that. I think that's something we could, probably not conducive at the moment to try to do something like that, but in the future, depending on how things go, I think that would be something to consider as well. That's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you guys for listening to us, and this is a very exciting project for our tribe and all of us, and I know I've been tracking it long before we purchased it, and even when it was still in the Blue Heron ownership, and it's just nice to see where we've come today and the vision that we have for the property, and I think it will be very beneficial for all of Oregon City and Oregon. So it's a beautiful site, and it's got a lot of rich history, and it's just nice to be able to revitalize that and make it a beautiful place for all Oregonians to enjoy. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And I do think with that, John, do you have some gifts for Councilman? We've got some gifts that we would like to present to you.
Nice.
Go down. The sign of our friendship and partnership, we'd like to share these with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
My friend, good to see you.
Thank you, Bill. So I am going to call us into a 5-minute recess just so that we can say goodbye to our visitors and then reshuffle into our next configuration. So we will be back at 7:20. Commission work session. We have our friends from the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee joining us for a joint work session on the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So before we get started, if we could go around the table with our Parks and Rec Advisory Committee members, and if you could introduce yourselves. I know some of you and I don't know others, and so if we could go around the table, starting over here by next to Commissioner Smith.
Hi, I'm Erin McClellan. I just joined this year.
Awesome, thank you.
Neil, I got next practice partners.
Kendall Reed, Parks and Recreation Director, Oregon City.
Tom Kissinger, Parks and Cemetery Manager, Oregon City.
Tim Lanehart, PrAC member.
I'm sorry, could you?
Tim Lanehart's PrAC member.
Thank you.
And Melissa Sebastian, Aquatic and Recreation Manager.
Ken Worcester, PrAC member.
Steve Williams, PrAC member.
Tony Conkle, City Manager.
Mike Mitchell, City Commission.
Adam Marl, City Commissioner.
Rocky Smith, City Commission.
And then we have Commissioner O'Donnell joining us right now. Mr. Conkle, if you don't have anything to introduce, I would like to pass it over to Mr. Reed.
Thank you. City Commissioners, PrAC, we're very excited to present to you our Parks Master Plan and also our CIP plan project list. We initiated this project back in April of 2022. We've had a robust public engagement process that included stakeholder interviews with community members, city commissioners, city leadership, staff. We've had numerous public engagement meetings. Just last night, we completed our fifth or sixth public engagement meeting at the Pioneer Center. And we've done statistical surveys, online surveys. We really feel like we had the opportunity to engage with the community, and this plan reflects the needs and wants of the community moving forward. So we're really excited about this conversation. We're hoping to get some feedback about the plan and also about the projects, and also have some conversations around alternative funding moving forward, because we really want to be able to implement this plan moving forward. So it's my pleasure to introduce Nilay Bhatt of Next Practice Partners.
Great, thank you everybody. Good to be with you all again. As I always say, I will keep this short and we will be done by 10 o'clock. Just a quick recap as well, if we could share on the screen, please. We were right here a few months earlier as we shared the findings, the vision, mission, values, and the big moves. We've continued to get input from the PrAC as well. Had a great public meeting last night, about almost 20 community members, PrAC members. Commissioner Mitchell showed up as well, and we had some great input from folks. Just excited about implementation, right? So just a quick recap of how we arrived here as well. Very, very quick highlight, 3 steps. Where are we today? Where do we want to go? How will we get there? The focus today and going forward very much is how will we get there, right? So that's where we've gotten most of the input earlier. 700 plus, including all of you, have participated in a variety of ways. In person, online, website, statistically valid online surveys. Kendall referenced to the public meetings. So we very, very confidently feel that the input here is reflective of the community at large in a statistically reliable, defensible way, but also overlaid with trends and the input from key leaders such as yourself and the staff as well. A couple of key things that obviously impact the CIP as well. As we look at the level of service, this is very much in terms of what does the community have access to, both from the city as well as the other service providers, and a couple of areas that are in red. So this tracks your current and projected population. It tracks the current inventory and custom recommended standards of service for Oregon City, based on which we have a need for about 29 acres of parkland over the next 10 years, about 3 miles of trail, a few courts for a sport you may or may not have heard of, pickleball. Just saying, it's still the fastest growing sport in the country. As well as off-leash or at least a fenced dog park and indoor recreation aquatic square footage. This is simply a function of quantity. It does not reflect quality or capacity. So case in point, in terms of the level of service for a pool, you do have one, but in terms of its capacity or its life cycle, you're not where you need to be, right? So that's where there is also the equity of access. We showed you the equity maps the last time that showed gaps and overlaps. And all of this really then gets into the priority investment rating, which is derived from the statistically reliable survey instrument. What this measured was a combination of what's important to the community, what is a need, and to what extent is that need being met. So things that the community and your constituents said they feel is important to their family and the need is still unmet, that becomes the highest priority for investment. So there are things you will see in here that may be lower, but it's not because it's not important to the community. It's likely because you've done a better job meeting those needs than some of the others. So as you look at that from a priority for investment for facility amenities, you will see trails, parkland, water access, open space, fenced dog park, neighborhood parks, indoor aquatics, picnic areas, and so on. I share these because obviously a lot of these elements are what will be then talked about as we think of the big moves. The capital improvement plan speaks about that as well in terms of site-specific assessments and feasibilities. Now the next part of this, we did the same exercise for programs, and this is where you can see our program needs can drive facility amenity design as well. Two of the top three, adult and senior fitness and wellness programs, which can include a variety of fitness, recreation, and aquatics. A couple of the others, farmers market, community special events, and cultural enrichment programs. We had a great presentation just before this in terms of things that I know Commissioner Marl, you said, what connects and unites the community, right? And that's where a lot of these programs also come into play, is creating a sense of belonging and a sense of community, which Parks and Recreation does a terrific job. Obviously with historic and interpretive programs, that is really important as well with the sites we have. That's another high priority here. So as we think of all of these different things, the thought is, how does this manifest into future recommendations? Bless you. And that comes in more from the visioning process, which we went through an iterative process with the staff multiple times, getting their input, leading to these core values of being collaborative, engaged, respectful, transparent, and ultimately servant leaders. As we think in terms of the vision, very much ties back to an inclusive, sustainable, which is both environmental and fiscally sustainable, and an impactful agency whose mission at the end of the day, above and beyond anything else, is simply to serve the community. So with all that in mind, what the plan resulted in were what we shared with you all last time as well, these major outcomes, if you will, are the big moves. And this, you look at a range of, from exploring diverse revenue opportunities to staffing as well. As the levels of service increase, how does the staff capacity keep up with providing a higher level of service, taking care of what you have with the maintenance management strategy, the capital improvement plan, telling your story, right? More and more as we think of current times as well, it is so important to be able to tell your story. And this is a system-wide plan. So part of it is also looking specifically at site-specific master and business plans, so you can make more informed decisions in terms of future plans for development, acquisition, and what's it going to cost to run and operate those spaces and staff them. That's where the recreation and aquatic center, or the pool, the EOT as well as looking at the cemetery plan specifically come into play. And so what we look at is, as you adopt the plan and then move into implementation, these would be some of the first steps we would recommend as a part of the master plan implementation, is having a master and a business plan, both for the EOT and the cemetery, looking at a feasibility study for the pool and the rec center, right? There is no question there is a need. It is really important. And as Kendall said, this is a plan we all want to implement. But what's it going to cost and what's it going to take to do it? What's the best site? What does that look like? All of those things are what you need a feasibility and a business plan for. These are some of the elements you will see in the CIP, the Capital Improvement Project list you have in front of you too. Obviously, looking at updating the SDCs as well. There isn't one single silver bullet to address all the funding needs. You know that, we know that, and that's what we discussed last time too. So some of the things to bring back to you are the areas you had identified as potentially viable and worth exploring some more as well. So looking at a utility fee assessment, a bond referendum as well for capital projects, and more we see public-private partnerships too. We had the Parks Alliance yesterday. I know they've sent a letter in to you all as well as a part of this meeting too, just talking about, again, the non-profit group and the support from foundations, etc. So it's going to take literally the village, the entire city, all of us to collectively help look at ways to implement it. But these were some of what we thought the early steps in terms of having the plans, looking at funding strategies, and knowing that ultimately money follows a plan and a vision. And so once we have the master plan and the site-specific plans, it's going to get a whole lot easier to implement these as well in the best way possible to reflect your vision and the community's values. So now I'm going to pause for a moment here before we switch into the funding and revenue options and the CIP matrix. Anything to add, Kendall?
Yes, and the important thing to highlight is how everything is connected in regards to our plans that we've already done and how it ties into our vision moving forward. So we completed deferred maintenance assessments. So you'll see a lot of the deferred maintenance projects listed in our CIP project. We just wrapped up our facilities master plan. We were able to get some great feedback from the City Commission about what their vision is for some of our facilities, which is also reflected. The other things are public engagement are going to be important for these facilities and these parks moving forward. So we also highlighted that in our CIP plan as well. So we believe that everything that's been talked about over the past 2 years, all of the projects and all of the plans and the feedback, the levels of service, the recommendation from the community, priority investment, all of that is being reflected in these plans, and they all talk to each other. So we feel like that's extremely important. The other thing that I like to highlight as we kind of dovetail into a conversation around funding is that there were some conversations had before me back in September of 2018, joint work session just like this, they had some conversations about alternative funding. So the options that we are presenting are similar options that were presented back in 2018, and there was some conversation around what were some of the best options or what people felt comfortable moving forward with. And we felt like now that we have the information from the community, now that we have the information from our plans, that this would be a great opportunity to really kind of dive in and figure out what the city commissioners, what PRAC feel comfortable with moving forward, investigating in regards to the options and educating the community on as options for alternative funding to possibly implement this plan and take care of some of these projects that we have listed here.
So is that any more presentation or?
No, so I mean really the next slide was really going through the project itself.
Okay.
As we look at the CIP worksheet, if there are any thoughts, and you'll see the categories as you go through it. The rows in green talk about sort of the sectional breakdown of how these projects are categorized and classified. That's a new park development, trails, trailheads, and connections. A big part of the survey component was where people want to spend the money, and a lot of it was focused on taking care of what you have and improving that. So you'll see a large list of strategic priorities which came from the facilities master plan too, which are the park improvements. And then as you go through some of the others, that's where you'll see the recreation amenities, the rec center, river access, and trail upgrades. These are things that we feel, again, in terms of the order of priority, are probably 1A. And then the ones, as you see at the very bottom, those are more the aspirational upgrades. If we're truly able to stretch for those, that would really be the 1B. What you do see, though, is in the rec center expansion and new development category, you'll see a number of plans that are essentially looked at as well. So you'll see the EOT master plan, the ADA transition plan as well, site-specific plans, the cemetery plan, the aquatic rest center, and as you look at these plans too as a system-wide master plan, it's something that has to be updated every 5 years at minimum as well. So those are some things that have been looked at too, so that you've got site-specific, details, public input, and a cost that is realistic as you then go out to seek funding sources.
So one of the things that Nilay also mentioned was the work that we're doing with our SDCs. We're currently working with the consultant to look at revising our methodology, but also looking at the projects that are proposed and tying SDCs to these projects, because we know that that will also be a funding component. So that conversation will allow us to look at all of the tools that we have in regards to funding with the SDCs, whether it be general fund, whether it be grants, and be able to kind of manage how we kind of phase in these projects moving forward, and have a clear idea of where the money is going to be coming from as well.
Perfect. So, discussion? Questions? Commissioner O'Donnell?
This might not be the right place for this, but I got to say this. I understand by its very nature, a master plan proposes big solutions to major deficiencies. But while we're doing that, in the meantime, one of the things that struck me was the equity of access piece. If there's one area of this community that has inequity of access, it's Park Place. And an example. Well, that's
Sorry to interrupt you.
You can add to it.
I will. Guaranteed.
Add to it. But I mean, the reason Park Place strikes me is because a young couple approached me about they can't even get a swing set for their 2 to 6 year olds to play on, because the only one available is in a schoolyard that they can't use during school hours. So what I'm saying is, and this may not be the place, while we're solving these major problems, don't forget the little things, because little things can have a big impact on the community. So don't lose sight of them. What do you want to add?
Yes, Park Place is underserved. The Caulfield neighborhood, plus kind of the whole triangle, Beaver Creek Road, Malala, 213, we have one park. We have no public facility, meeting space, anything else. Plus, that area is divided up by Beaver Creek, which is difficult to cross, and 213, which is even worse. There's 180 new apartments already occupied across the street from the high school. There are 420 apartments under construction right now, 170 of them nearing completion, that happen to be 2 blocks from my house. And to say that Tyrone Woods Park, which is a great park, but to say that's our neighborhood park, no, it's not. It's not walking distance for any family. So I want it clearly spelled out in here when we're talking about underserved levels of service, that the Park Place neighborhood and the area, the Caulfield neighborhood and the other area that I just called out are specifically mentioned in here as severely underserved.
Thank you. Can I respond to that for a moment?
Oh, sure. Please do.
Those are great points, and as we've shown that the last time as well, you're right. We do have a deficit of about 29 acres that we identified for neighborhood parkland, right? So that simply talks of quantity. The equity maps we've shown identify access, right? So your point in terms of gaps is very evident as you look at some of the maps for every amenity type, where what kinds of areas might be underserved by what type of amenities or parkland. So that allows you as well in a much more transparent way to make decisions as you go towards development, acquisition, etc., that you're using the community priorities for parkland, the level of service which shows a deficit, and the equity maps which show where the gaps are, to then make these very decisions as well. So your point's right on, and the data will support that in very transparent and visible ways as you look at implementation.
And I'd just like to add too, you'll notice at the very top, Park Place is listed for Phase 2 development. We have a master plan. It has a Phase 2. We know that it's underserved, and we can have conversations about, hey, what are going to be the priorities moving forward as we present the CIP plan and budgeting, and what do we want to make a priority moving forward. So we do know that there's a need there, and it is highlighted in the CIP plan.
And I know that, but my point is, in the interim,
The other area that I
in the interim, while we're trying to provide these giant solutions, maybe there's some small solutions we can do that'll improve the quality of life for some people.
So I have a question, I guess, or maybe I need some clarification on it would be the level of service inventory. So it says in one section that we have 189 acres and it meets the standards. And then the total park acres meets the standards, but then we also have a need for 29 acres of neighborhood park. So to me, it conflicts. So how do you?
Good question. That's a good observation.
Well, and then I have another part of that too.
Yeah, go ahead.
So then if you go farther down and then you list basketball courts, playgrounds, and most of those things meet. So if you buy 29 acres of neighborhood park and assuming everything else meets standards, what do you put in the neighborhood parks?
So I'll address the first part first, right? Where I think differently in that is your total park acreage meets the standard, but you are overserved in one type of park and underserved in the other type, which is where you see the difference, right? So if I purely look at the overall park acreage, great, but then there are still areas that don't have walkable access. You've seen that too in the 10-minute walk that we look at it, you are still quite deficient as well. So that's where I think differently that, the two can coexist. Yes, the total number meets it, but the mix of park types and uses, that's where you have one area that is underserved. Now, in terms of your observation, that's a great point. Just because something says it meets the standards, that's the floor, not the ceiling, right? A lot of these, as you look at the park improvements, even what you have, as I said, in the level of service, is simply quantity. The life cycle, the actual usability of those may or may not be great, right? So that's why as you think of some of the new park improvements, these certain deferred maintenance requirements may go away in some places. If you update the entire park, then the old aging equipment's gone. You suddenly now re-up the life cycle. In some of the other places, you might say we want to look at, and we heard this at the meeting yesterday, a community member mentioned her 5-year-old grandson who, because of lack of ADA access, could not access the park or the playground equipment. So those might be things you look at above and beyond to say, what does universally accessible play equipment look like? 10 years ago, I didn't hear anybody talk about pickleball. Now I'm starting to hear the next version of it, which is a sport called padel. I don't know if some of you may have heard of that. But there are new things, new trends that may continue to come about as well that go above and beyond these. So my sense would be as you go forward, sure they meet the standards, but the amenities you look at may have a higher level of use, a more inclusive use, going back to your vision as well, or new trends that may emerge at that point in time that you all as leaders would consider and say, yep, this makes sense for this site, and let's do it. Does that answer your question?
Well, kind of.
Tell me more.
So I guess, because I have a kind of a concern when, if you use pickleball for an example, and it says we need 2, right? I'm not going to advocate one way or the other for pickleball, but if we only need 2, it seems like it's pretty easy then to kind of shove those 2 pickleball courts clear out somewhere past any of the planning for these 29 acres of neighborhood parks, because they're in a neighborhood. And most people will probably eventually say, well, we don't want a pickleball court in our neighborhood. We kind of know how that's trending around. So, so sometimes you can use those meet standards to then, as an argument to not do something that the community wants as well. And so how do you reconcile that, I guess? And that's a challenge, because when you when you start to do a neighborhood master plan, and they say, well, we want playgrounds, and we want all of these things, and you can't use this to say, well, gee, we meet the standards with all of this, but the neighborhood doesn't think you do.
And so I will never say not to listen to the input of the people, right? That's the foundational element of this. At the same time, again, as I said, this is quantity. So you may have the number of playgrounds you need in the city as a whole, and yet some neighborhoods may be underserved while others may be overserved, right? So that's where the equity maps will also help you. Think about it. When you do a neighborhood-specific plan, you might say, sure, we have X number of pickleball courts or playgrounds or basketball courts, but we have them in this side of the city, and we don't have them in this other side.
Right.
So going back to the principle and the vision of inclusion and equity of access, even though you might meet the minimum number, you don't meet the equitable standards, so you would still probably want to do it in those places, right? That's why, again, there isn't one single data source. The whole idea of this plan is triangulation between trends, where you see pickleball still continuing to grow, trends where I see user base getting younger for that sport, your demographics, which show people living longer and more active, and then the level of service, the survey, the equity maps all together, right? So it's when you get all those pieces put together, that's when it's part art, part science, because you all live and breathe this every day. This is just data on a piece of paper, but it's also your own community interactions, what you hear from the community, what you see around you. In addition to this, and the community input when you do a site-specific plan, that's going to help you make the best decision at that point in time.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that help answer?
Yeah, well, it does, yes, thank you.
Mr. Williams?
Yeah.
Thank you. Just a follow-up to Ken's question, in terms of, there's a lot of pages in this plan, lots of information in this plan, but the distinction between the quantity versus the basically having all of that quantity in the right place.
Right.
Is there a place that we can highlight that distinction and maybe it's there and I missed it, but so that people understand that while we say we met a criteria, we are cognizant of the fact that there needs to be other looking at that and some way to highlight that so that it can be a better seen by the public and have them understand that we are looking that way?
Yeah, and yes, I mean, as you said, it's a pretty long report, but yes, in the report, there are literally subsequent sections which talks about this is the quantity-based level of service. The very next section is how does that quantity translate into access level of service. So anybody seeing it is going to see them right one after the other to say, these are the numbers of how many we have, these are the locations of where we have, and it's very evident where they are served or underserved as well. So you will seldom, if ever, at least as far as we do it, even in the exec summary, you will always see them together. That way for a reader, they're able to look at that and understand that these are, as Kendall said earlier, very interconnected pieces as well. So.
Just to follow up with that, the challenge is, what you just described is buried pretty deep down inside. You got to get, some of it you got to get quite a ways in to see that. Having that out maybe a little more forward so people can see that up front is maybe a better way to at least let folks understand that our plan does take into consideration all those kinds of things.
And I also think that ties into us doing a better job of telling our story. I know we're looking at developing a marketing plan to be able to actually talk to the community about who we are, what we provide, talk more about the plan and what's in the plan. And so the community, we can engage with the community and get additional input so we can continue to kind of refine what the needs and wants are moving forward. So I think that onus really falls on myself and my team to be actually getting out in the community, telling that story and engaging with the community to highlight, hey, we know we're meeting the standard, but there are greater needs here, and we want to hear from you what those needs are so it can be reflected in our redevelopment or priorities or capital projects moving forward. So we don't just want to meet the standard. We want to provide exceptional parks and recreation services moving forward. So.
Thank you.
See, I think you need to look at your data and you need to be the proactive movers. Because the truth of the matter is, people are busy raising their children, they're busy earning a living, and you may never hear their input. So you do your study the way you did, and it's excellent, and then you say, what can I do for a long-term solution, and what can I do in the interim? What can I do now, and what's going to require significant funding that I don't even have available now? Short-term improvements and long-term planning and execution.
Further questions or comments? Commissioner Smith?
Go.
So one of the things that, and there's so much here, but one of the things that, there's some things that surprised me on the high priority investment charts and all that. I think to generalize this, how we market this, right, and whatever funding sources we decide to come up with, and as we know that constantly the public's being asked to give more money for whatever else in any given year, so I think most of us in Oregon City have felt at some point that's going to stop, where people are going to say, okay, it's enough. We've been lucky, you know, with the amount of buildings we've been at, you know, police station, all these facilities we've been able to tackle, school bonds and all these things, college bonds, fire bonds. So at what point does that stop? We keep asking the public for more. What we have to always focus on is what is the top priorities? What is the public asking for? And sell that. And what I think is really interesting, and I sit on the board at Clackamas Heritage Partners, which is the organization that manages the end of the Oregon Trail. Knowing that the success of the end of the Oregon Trail has been hit and miss from day one, and knowing that that building is one of the buildings that has the most needs in terms of deferred maintenance, and I've tried to have some realistic dialogue with the board on the likelihood that the community is going to support building a new museum. It's probably unlikely. But what they will build, according to some of these things, is what I was kind of shocked. I knew that concerts would be up there. I knew that an amphitheater would be up there. I knew that community events would be up there. We have two places to do community events, Clackamas Park and End of the Oregon Trail. That's it. We've kind of solidified Clackamas Park. We know what End of the Oregon Trail is on a concert night, parking. It's not conducive to an event center, nor do I think whatever we would have ever done to Clackamas Park would make it conducive to a large event. I think we're in a way to finance some of this. We have to think about, the swimming pool facility and that, and how we brand this and how we market it to the community. I think partnerships that we have overlooked, not necessarily overlooked, but have decreased in past years with the school district or with multi-use shared spaces. But what shocked me on this list at the top is, even though we're talking about, I knew, people are going to want to replace the pool or talk about a way to deal with that. But the fact that, and I guess not only are we going to have farmers market in city parks, but we're going to have so many farmers markets in this town. We're going to have one down at the end of the Oregon Trail. We're going to have one at the falls. We're going to have, but I think that's just a general comment to community events. And then down a little bit further, the third bar down, community special events. But here's what I was shocked by. Cultural enrichment programs and events, and historic preservation programs. Now, we're probably not going to get the community to support building a brand new museum. But if the view of the End of the Oregon Trail's future is cultural programming, is event space, is an amphitheater, is whatever, that museum piece could still have a part in that, but it's not going to be something that is going to take the top priority in terms of the public saying we need to build a new museum that doesn't make any money. So I think how we, I think leverage that is huge. The other piece is how we do that in the time that we're in Oregon City. We just had this dialogue about healing. The two locations we're talking about possibly demolishing and redoing are very significant historic sites. People don't know the history of the swimming pool, but it's a historic site that has very interest in history, and the end of the Oregon Trail site as well. Part of knowing that this community has an interest in that is an extra leverage to not only say, hey, we need to replace these buildings because we have that park's need, but we need to replace these buildings because these sites are conducive to a different story or conducive to a better use that fits these things on this chart. And there's no way people would not support that. I think that is very, I've been talking about this in multiple different sections on how we do that. I think it's a dialogue we need to really focus on big picture, because if people can, in terms of heritage and culture, and you can't mix all these all together, but there are pieces of this that resonate that I think would be more engaging to the public to support, saying, oh yeah, we are going to demolish the swimming pool and build a new one, and here's why. Not only is it because we need a new pool, but because this site has a different piece of, a different heritage or a different story that needs to be told on that site, or what is the end of the Oregon Trail site. So I think how we think about those, and I'm trying to think about those in any way possible. Eastham School site that have overlaps with the school district and the city, other sites that we haven't quite thought about and how they could be used. So that's big picture kind of what I think we really need to focus on as kind of how we market that as a big picture. And that's telling the story of the city and the story of where the city's going. Because the more buy-in we get from everyone, the better we have of chance we have of doing it. Because if we get into specifics of individual parks or individual properties, it's diluted. So I think we all know that we have to tackle these projects in a big way, and I think we do it in a big way, and we don't try to compartmentalize things. Say, well, this is the needs, this is what the community wants, let's do it, and get the support behind it to do it. I think we can.
Thank you. Commissioner Mitchell, did you have something?
Are you going to introduce the capital improvement, the money part of this, or are we ready to eat?
We can transition into the money part if everyone's done having conversations about the project.
I just had one comment that I thought might be helpful to provide a little bit of a definition of, neighborhood, community, because as you go down, and then when you do try to start introducing a new park in an existing area, not necessarily a neighborhood, but an area, sometimes, the expectation is, well, we just want a little neighborhood park. We don't really want a park that, everybody from the rest of the city is going to come to. It'll happen, I'll guarantee it. So maybe something that kind of says, typically these are what you would find in a neighborhood park. These are also things that you may find in a community park. You might find them in a regional park, but not everything is really boxed into those park designations. And so I think just to try to facilitate the master planning and the site plans later on, it just, you kind of be able to point to someplace and say, yeah, you're right, it's a neighborhood park, but we know your kids are going to be playing baseball here. Well, is that a community facility or is it a neighborhood facility? So, you know what I mean? It's just kind of, so just something that would kind of give, not necessarily expectations, but it would help maybe as we move forward.
All right, so seeing no further comments, let's continue moving on the finances.
All right. So like I mentioned, back in September of 2018, there was a conversation with PRAC and the City Commission looking at alternative funding options. And so we've listed all of the options here. And what we've tried to do is provide examples of other jurisdictions, what they've done. Also provide some pros and cons, and also highlight some of the limitations. Some can only be used for capital projects. Some can be used for capital projects and operations. Some require a voter approval. And so they all come with different issues. But we felt like it would be important to bring this information to you, to have some conversations around, hey, these are some of the pros and cons of these funding options. What do you feel like would be the best option? And then we can go one by one if you like. I know we had some conversations just recently during the budget committee meeting about general fund support and increasing the permanent tax rate. We didn't get a lot of support during that conversation. We have it here. If it's something that you'd like to pursue, we'd be open to those conversations. With a general obligation bond, it can be used for land acquisition and capital projects, but not for operations or maintenance. So that would definitely be something, like if we're looking at a big capital project like the pool, this would be a great idea, we think, moving forward. A local option levy, it's up to 5 years for operation levy or 10 years for capital levy, and it's most often used for operations. It requires a voter approval. It's flexible, but we feel like it's not a long-term solution, and you need to have like continued public vote for ongoing support. And then a park district, that was immediately shot down back in 2018 and wasn't considered viable. I don't know what the appetite is for that with all of you. It comes with its pluses. You lose some efficiency that you have. You lose some control as well. So that's something to consider. A park utility fee, we think is a great option. There's a lot of benefits. West Lynn has had a lot of great success. Ken can tell you all about it. But in regards to addressing some of the deferred maintenance, this we feel like would be a great option for us to address that and have some ongoing funding. Now, back in 2018, when this conversation was brought up, there were some concerns around all of the utility fees that we currently have going and people being exhausted with adding additional utility fees. So that's definitely something that we would want to consider. And then a transient tax, dedicated tax revenue from tourism tied to parks and recreation. And that can be used for capital projects and operations. So those are the major ones that we thought would be viable options. We also included some of the information from our statistically valid survey and some of the feedback that we got from the community about the general fund support and also for the general obligation bonds and also for the park utility fees. So.
Since we put this together, I talked to Matt a little bit in finance. And so like on the first one for general fund support, 25 cents per thousand. So we have approximately 65 cents, just under 65 cents, where we could raise the millage rate, the tax rate. But that number based on today's assessed value is about a little over 900,000, so a quarter. 25 cents equals about 925,000, roughly.
That's the revenue stream you get out of it?
Correct. Okay. So just to put that in perspective, so you think about it this way, a dime is about $375,000. Okay. If you levied the entire 65 cents, it'd be about 2.4 million. Okay. Plus or minus, right? There's collection rates on this. we collect somewhere between 95%, 98%, depending on the tax year. So for example, C-Safe is $6.50 per month for all in the city. So residents, businesses, we don't tier it at all. So it's $6.50 flat fee is about 1.2 million. Okay, so just trying to give you some perspective of what X 650 equals 1.2, right? 10 cents is roughly 375. Didn't do the math backwards. When we were going out for urban renewal, we had about 3.1 million, would have been about $40 million. Interest rates have doubled, so I don't have that number now. So obviously significantly less with the interest rates at where they're at today. But, depending on, more of that will come as we kind of dive into these discussions and which route or direction that we receive. But, the millage rate and like the C-Safe, those are easy to calculate and give you.
Discussion? I will say, heading back to the conversation we had during budget season and my own unwillingness to look at increasing the property tax rate really comes down to the fact that future commissions can use that however they want. What I want for such a pressing matter is for something, is a funding source where it's dedicated to this, and that future commissions and future budget committees don't have the ability to get their hands in there and move it to something else. And so that's where I come from when it comes to the general fund support. I echo what Commissioner Smith has already said. I think we're reaching a point where the community, I think it feels like fee after fee after fee. When is it going to be the point when our residents are just done with that? And so I am glad to see the statistically valid survey results about the 76% indicating they would pay a park utility fee. That's something that I would be open to discussing. I know that actually in our future work session agenda items, and I'm sorry I skipped that actually, we are discussing the pavement maintenance utility fee and what the future of that looks like. And so maybe if we were to pair those conversations together about how we might be able to make it more palatable to our residents, I think is something that I would be most in favor of looking at this menu of options. Further discussion?
Yes. There was one thing I wanted to add, sorry, real quick. So $650, a month is $78 a year, right? If you took the assessed value of a house, not the market value. Remember, we're bifurcated in Oregon, right? We have the market value, which is what a house is going to sell for, versus the assessed value, which can only go up 3% unless certain other things happen, right? So your market, especially in the metro region, is usually, significantly lower than the assessed value is usually significantly lower than the market. But for easy math, if you took an assessed value, not a market value, an assessed value of a $500,000 home, right? 10 cents per thousand is $50 a year, right? So, let's just say you want to get 1.2 million, which is what the PMUF brings in. So for $78 a year, you bring in 1.2 million roughly. That would be roughly 3 times, so 30 cents, a little over that, to get to 1.2 million, so that's at 150. This was a lot of the discussion because of the fee and how it's applied to all utility bill payers, nonprofits, schools, churches, everyone pays into it. It's actually cheaper than trying to raise the same amount of money just through the properties that can be taxed. So once again, we can dive into that depending on how this discussion goes with Matt and put together, we've got all those numbers broken down.
I think
Mr. Williams.
Knowing what revenue streams are generated by each of these approaches. The other thing is, we're trying to solve an immediate problem, and as that problem evolves, I don't know if it'll ever get less. Once you put something in place, a tax or whatever, it seems to exist in perpetuity. And maybe there's a review process that says at the end of X number of years, this will disappear. And I don't know if that's realistic or not, but things that are put in place, they just exist forever, even after people lost sight of why they were there in the first place.
And that was something that I kept trying to hammer home during our budget process. Mr. Williams.
Thank you. Just an observation, and no one likes any more taxes or fees. I don't think anybody does. However, in the time that I have spent around working with the parks issues and working with the public through quite a few of these meetings, we do sit, I think, in a bit of a unique place here where we've got an awful lot of public support, more than I've witnessed in a lot of other issues that I have been involved with the public, who are very supportive of our parks, get positive recommendations. We got feedback here from some fairly good statistical evaluations that says, there's some willingness there. Now, I think earlier we talked about marketing, and obviously it comes down to how do you market that and take advantage of it. But I do think there's some kind of a glimmer of an opportunity there right now that we might be able to take advantage of to try and get some dedicated funding. I'm certainly not an expert in how to do those things. You folks have dealt with these kinds of things way more than I certainly ever have, but I think we've seen through some of the information we've got that there is potentially some opportunities there, given a good marketing plan and a good strategy that might be able to put us in a better place. And we might want to take advantage of it sooner rather than later, given how things change dramatically over time. So, thank you.
Commissioner Marl, can I add a couple comments? Just building on what you're saying as well, I mean, we all know this. If you look at the CIP list that we have, this is the cheapest it's ever going to be to make these improvements. Right. So that is certainly something for us to keep in mind going forward, that the deferred maintenance is not going to disappear. It's only going to get more expensive to do less work in the future, right? The other piece is I have seen unprecedented level of support for parks and recreation post-pandemic because people see that as essential, right? For all reasons, from a personal standpoint to say social, mental, emotional well-being, great. And from an economic impact standpoint, because if people can work from anywhere, they want to go where they have a great quality of life, right? Remote work, hybrid work is only increasing, and people want to be in places where they can do things beyond work, where they can walk to places where there is history, there's culture, there's recreation, there's parks, there's aquatics, there's all of those things. So 89% of all bond referendums in the last election passed, irrespective of the political affiliation of the agencies. We've seen, in terms of philanthropic giving, this is as of January, on the heels of the park system master plan that was done in Indianapolis. We did the previous plan, we just updated it. Eli Lilly's foundation, the endowment that exists for the Global Pharma Company, gave the single largest gift in the state's history to improve existing parks and recreation because of the master plan, $80 million. In Atlanta, they doubled their millage for maintenance, where they now go from $8 million a year to $16 million a year just to maintain what exists. So just to say that again, to your points as well, if you have a plan and a vision, and you all have been such good stewards of public dollars over time, I feel like you've earned the trust. The projects you mentioned that have been done before as well, the way you looked at it, I would feel very confident looking at the survey data, and of course you want to do specific plans, that you've got the right confluence of a community that values what you're looking to do and the time frame in which you probably look at it on the heels of a plan when there is momentum, versus down the line where as economic conditions change, things may get even tougher to do, even the basic things like you mentioned, just to fix what you have as well, let alone the visionary projects.
Any comments over here?
I have a question.
Please.
And I'm fairly new to this operation, but when was the last time that parks pursued a levy or a bond was included on one of those?
Never. I don't.
Interesting. It's very interesting.
I don't think.
Okay, thank you. That was mostly my question. I mean, with all that support that we're hearing, and I think that with a strong, I won't say necessarily marketing, but a strong brand and storytelling, I think that you will be able to ignite that feeling within people that, oh, my kids learned to swim here. My kids played at this playground. I got that swing set built at that park. So those things are the things that make people want to support something. And there's nothing easier or better than Parks and Rec. I mean, who doesn't want to fund a beautiful park? I think it's a great opportunity.
Question? Back to, you were talking about the SDC update. When do we have an idea of when that will be completed?
We just received an update. We're actually planning to have a meeting with our consultant this month to talk about next steps. There's some questions that we're going to have to navigate related to our CIP. And then we've just requested an updated schedule. Okay. So we'll keep you up to date on kind of what the new schedule is going to be and make sure to share that with everyone.
Because one of the things that I think scares me the most is that the property's going to disappear way faster than SDCs will accumulate, and once it's gone, you're not going to make any more. And I don't know, where the UGB is, and I haven't looked at all that. But I mean, property acquisition has got to be kind of one of the highest priorities, I think, at this point, where it's kind of a moot issue. And I don't know, and the SDCs, I mean, then there's a whole nother thing about, how much will be, willing to, what can we place on to the SDC fee, because, there's all of those other arguments about affordable housing and everything else, and everybody complains about the fees, and, so it's a kind of a complex issue, but without knowing what we can potentially get from, the next 10,000 people that are projected to be moving into the city, which isn't a lot by, not a lot of people, I guess. So you're not going to be able to probably assign a huge number to that SDC, I don't think, that'll take care of, like, the CIP. So that's just a big piece of the puzzle that needs to kind of be factored in pretty quickly.
And on the subject of next steps, what is it that you need from us tonight that will help you moving forward? Again, I'll reiterate, I think that it would be good for us when we reevaluate the PMF to maybe have at least a preliminary, some preliminary numbers from finance about what additional fees might look like. I think that could be helpful for us. But what is it that you would like to leave tonight with from us?
So we would like some direction on if you feel comfortable with us moving forward with approval and adoption of the master plan that's been presented. And with the conversation around the CIP, we'll continue along with the conversation around SDCs. And then what we'll need to do is have some conversation around kind of narrowing down some of these options in regards to funding, and get some direction on what you feel comfortable with us moving forward and pursuing, and so we can develop a strategy of what that looks like as well.
Were you gonna?
Yeah,
Commissioner Mitchell.
I'm gonna try to not send us too far into the weeds. But I did just notice as I'm sitting here, so $6.50 a month pavement maintenance fee generates $1.2 million a year. It would only take 144 years to pay for this total with aspirational goals line. So, and I bring that up because I think we've got to realize how big the boulder is in front of us that we've got to try to push uphill. And again, without going too far in the weeds, I have to ask some questions about this CIP page. In the 400-page master plan, there was information, financial information from Bureau Veritas that mentioned that listed 5 different facilities. Why those 5? Are those just meant to be examples? And do we have that same information for all?
We have examples for the parks and all of the facilities. We actually did the assessment for the entire city. So we have an understanding of what the deferred maintenance is for the entire city. And so those particular reports that we're providing speak to immediate needs, because one of the things that we've been trying to do with our deferred maintenance assessment is have a plan that we can implement on an annual basis and identify what are the immediate needs that need attention right away. So when we do get to budget time, we know what we need to be advocating for. We don't want to continue to kick the can down the road. Now, we would be more than happy to include all of the assessments that we have into this, but with looking at this plan, we're thinking in 5 years there's going to need to be revisions to this plan, especially with all of the public engagement that needs to happen, and there will be more information that we will need to be including in this plan or revising. So this is going to be a dynamic plan that's going to be revised quite frequently and looked at on a regular basis. Even the CIP is going to be looked at on a regular basis based on funding and where we are.
Okay, so this section in the middle here, kind of where there's a deferred maintenance amount for every part, that's coming from those BB numbers?
Yes.
Okay.
You want to talk about that a little bit, Tom?
Sure, yeah. So they came directly from the BVTA reports. They represent 10 years of deferred maintenance.
How much, sorry?
10 years.
10 years.
For each park. So it's just kind of projecting out what we'll do over the course of this master plan, and as Kendall mentioned, we'll update that as we go through them. Some of those items are things that we kind of talked about this in our last PrAC meeting, they're smaller dollar items, things like replacing a bench or a trash can, that we can start to manage more on kind of the biennial budget level. But then there are larger ticket items, things that are like capital asset replacements, playgrounds that are outdated and we can no longer get parts for, restrooms that don't meet, current accessibility requirements, things like that we'll need to think about long-term funding for. We can look at different grants, and those are the items that are really kind of reflected here too.
Okay. And then just a couple more questions. On the top line, the pool and rec center number, the 40 million, that's based off what Lake Oswego spending?
Yeah. That is what we're utilizing to kind of project what it might cost.
Okay.
I think I had asked staff to put that in.
Yeah.
Just because we've done a couple of master plan updates, but we never updated the system development charges equivalent to the new CIP list. Right? And what I worry about is, while we need to do a master plan that was identified for multiple of the facilities, including the park or the pool, right? Where is it going to be? What is it going to be? We've got a good number that's at least a starting point, and whether it's 40 million or 30 million, at least it's justified based on a close proximity jurisdiction of equivalent size. That I would hate to lose. You lose 3 years of collecting SDCs, and if we get 400 units, it could be a significant amount of money that we will never get back in these assumptions that we're making. So, it's a little bit of a cart before the horse, but I think we can certainly justify it that the number is realistic based on existing construction going on right now. But, if the commission is not comfortable, we would pull that out, right? Because I think, as you said, there's many years, just assuming SDCs, to pay for this, or PIMA for the combination thereof, right? So we are going to get into a prioritization of projects, whether that's a fee or a geo bond or what, right? Because you're not going to be able to tackle even the 92 million.
Yeah. Right? So the 50 million for the end of the Oregon Trail, that's
it's
just a placeholder.
Just a placeholder. That's why, it's on the
aspiration.
Yeah.
Okay. You said a word. I'll stop after this. But the bones of the plan, I don't have that many problems with. It's how do we prioritize within that? Where's our top priority for acquiring parkland? Where on this $6.2 million? Where's our priorities for deferred maintenance? Where are we going to spend that money? And I think, I'll say right now, I think that is a role that our Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee should be right in the middle of. they're the representatives of the community as far as, okay, here are the places where things are falling apart the worst that we need to work on now, as opposed to we can put off. Or here are the areas that really need new parkland. So I'm putting a commercial in for their involvement in that, because I think the piece that is, whether or not this plan is successful, is going to be how we prioritize and phase that work. So we can really show the community that they're getting a bang for the money.
Yep. And I think as we work through this, right, as you're well aware on some of the other capital improvement plans or master plans that we've done tied to infrastructure, right, you're going to have an SDC eligible component of a project, right? Brand new park to serve, probably going to be significantly higher SDC eligible cost, right, versus something that's non-SDC eligible, right? That's always been the missing part that we've struggled with, right? The match to the SDC from the general fund, essentially, right? So I think you'll start to see these kind of break out, right? This big number is going to kind of get broken into two numbers, right? And then it's going to start to be a prioritization of that. So I think as we refine this, you know, I think these are exactly the discussion that we're going to have is, you know, what's the funding what's the new funding we want to identify, and what's that number going to be? How big, right? How much of the element do we try and cheer, right?
So, looking at the time and recognizing that we do have a large agenda item after this, is there general consensus among the commission and the committee members for staff and our consultants to move forward on this? Is there general consensus? I'm seeing some head nods.
Yes.
I'm very excited to see this. Did you have a comment, please?
I just wanted to say a final comment with regard to, on behalf of PRAC, I want to say thank you for having this joint meeting where we're able to get together and kind of discuss these things directly. It adds a bit more consistency and meaning for us as PRAC members as well, and I hope we can continue to provide you the advice that you need to make good decisions. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
We really appreciate it. Staff, Nile, is there anything else that you need from us?
No, you've got a great team here and great, volunteer leadership and all of you. So again, just thank you and wish you the best. And, get a plan adopted and implementation starts. So thank you.
Thank you. So we will say goodbye to our friends on the PRAC and transition into our next agenda item. Nile, it's always good to see you. So I think we will be calling up Ms. Hurd-Ravitch. Are we? Anyone else? And Ms. Richter.
Thanks for your time.
So we'll take a 5-minute break. All right, I will call back to order the work session of the City Commission. We are now on item number 3, Park Place Concept Plan Code Refinement. We did receive a comment card, and I would be interested if my colleagues are willing to take public comment, if that's the will of the Commission.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mr. Nacita, if you please.
Thank you, Chair. James Nacita, Oregon City. I just wanted to follow up of my email that I submitted this afternoon with a couple of other comments, because we're in very early in the process, and I just wanted to put some ideas on the table for all of you to let them percolate. And I appreciate the effort that was put into the very lengthy memo that staff submitted to the Commission. So when we did the hearings on the Park Place Crossing Plan, my principal interest was in the maintenance of the neighborhood village. You may recall that the plan attempted to basically wipe it out by shifting the park from where the park is in the concept plan and shifting it down to Main Street, and basically wiping out that neighborhood village. And you know, that's a problem. That was a problem. I fear that a lot of things that the state has done with clear and objective standards is going to put all of this more at risk as the plan moves forward from here. Back in February and today, I reiterated some solutions that I think could be considered moving forward with this process. And I won't go over those again here, but I wanted to add a couple more that I've been thinking about over the course of the afternoon. One is the idea of, as part of the code, taking some of the elements that you want to protect in the Park Place concept plan, and through the adoption of the ordinance, which will be involved in these code amendments, consider taking a couple of these elements and making them precise through a survey. And so a survey, to me, meets and bounds is clear and objective, and it would be defensible through the clear and objective standards process. And the two surveys I was thinking of was survey what the final dimensions of and boundaries of that park will be. And if you survey out that park, then, and the survey is incorporated into the ordinance, I think you have clear and objective standards that will be binding by ordinance and defensible. And the other survey that I would propose that you consider for adoption as part of an ordinance as well is surveying the precise dimensions of the neighborhood village as well. Now, as you may recall, in the Park Place concept plan, there's a notation, and it's repeated in the text of the Park Place concept plan, that the concept plan is conceptual and could be subject to change during the course of further planning and the course of development proposals. That type of flexibility with the advent of the clear and objective standards rule for housing puts, I think, the plan in a lot of danger, because you don't have, you're subject to having the whole thing wiped out because somebody can claim in a LUBA case or whatever that, your map is not clear and objective, so you can't enforce it at all. So why can't someone wipe out the neighborhood village by shifting down the park? This is going beyond my argument that, non-housing is not subject to clear and objective standards. I'm suggesting that you go even further than that and consider all, avenues where you can make your plan precise and defensible with clear and objective standards. comment, sorry. Blinking out. I don't see a clock, but you can tell me if I'm going too long, Mr. Chair.
Let's keep it to about 30 seconds.
Okay.
I think it's been almost about.
Okay, I had one other, just one other suggestion. Maybe Rocky has an institutional memory that I'm not recalling right now. I seem to recall that the city at one time had a parks district in its zoning ordinance. We now put parks in the institutional district. And another way to protect that park and other parks, I think, future parks in the other concept plans, is to restore the concept of a park zone. So right now, in the institutional district, you say you're going to put a park in there, but the institutional district will allow you to do other things as well. If you really want to preserve that park in the Park Place concept plan, if you break out parks into its own separate zone and then zone that area in the concept plan, again, through a survey very precisely, I think that would be defensible as well. So that's what I have. Thank you.
We have received a couple of emails, including from Mr. Nacita, and I found them to be insightful and helpful. So before we move on, since we've opened it up, if there's anyone else in the audience who would like to give a comment? All right, seeing none, I will hand it over to staff, and we will begin our discussion on this matter.
Great, thank you. Aquila Hurd-Ravitch with Pete Walter, and Carrie's here to answer questions as well. So I do have a PowerPoint that we'll go through. And this project is really to revise the municipal code to further implement the concept plan in a clear and objective manner where it's applicable. Okay, all right, so the objectives for tonight are basically to present an overview of the process that we're going to go through for revisions. We'll talk a little bit about the work that we've done so far and then the process moving forward. And then there'll be a time at the end for questions, discussion, and any feedback that you want to provide. But really, so I did provide you a pretty lengthy memo, kind of just to set some context. I'm not expecting a lot of input on that tonight. I realized that you had a long meeting ahead of this, so I just kind of wanted to lay the groundwork and step into that zero entry pool is a metaphor I like to use for some of these larger projects. And before we move on, I want to touch a little, just briefly on kind of how we got here. So as you recall, we did have a land use application in 2021 for a master plan, Park Place Crossing, which Mr. Nacita referenced. That application was ultimately denied. And you know the story, but the applicant appealed it to LUBA. LUBA remanded it. And so that whole process brought to light that we maybe needed some stronger code to implement the plan. I'd really like as much as possible to try to separate those two things. That was a quasi-judicial review, and now we're into this legislative review. That quasi-judicial land use application was for 92 gross acres, but the Park Place concept plan is a total of 480 gross acres. It's north and south of Redland Road, so it's much bigger than what that project was. So I just want to put that out there. That's how we got here, but if we can kind of shift gears and think on that kind of policy legislative process and just a long-range vision, that's really what these code amendments are about. Okay, so a little bit of background. So in 2008, the municipal code was amended to implement the concept plan. At that time, it was required to comply with Metro's Title 11. So Metro has their Urban Growth Management Functional Plan, and it's got titles 1 through 13 or maybe more, but one of those really lays out how new urban areas are planned for before they can come into the urban growth boundary. Now, back then it was different, so things have shifted, but so this area was brought into the urban growth boundary, required to comply with Title 13, and when it was adopted, it did comply with that title, and part of that was adopting a comprehensive plan, land use designations for everywhere that was in the concept plan. So that was done. There were code amendments that were made. And then since 2008, a lot has changed. For example, in 2017, the definition of needed housing changed, and the ability to review housing through clear and objectives, through discretionary standards, and now we're required to review housing through clear and objective standards. So that was one of the things that changed. You're familiar with House Bill 2001 from a couple of years ago that mandated middle housing, and so in 2022, the city adopted code to allow middle housing in single-family zones. More recently than that, just this year in the short session, there was another Senate bill adopted that requires jurisdictions to grant mandatory adjustments if developments meet certain thresholds. And as I mentioned, since 2008, Metro's Urban Growth Management Functional Plan has changed, and it's changed in the way that these new urban areas are reviewed. So one of those ways that changed is that when we did this, when the concept plan was initially done and adopted, there was a requirement by Metro to apply a 10 dwelling unit per acre density across the entire area. That isn't in Metro code anymore, but there's still Title I from Metro that requires the city to meet, and cities in general, just to meet minimum densities and to review land use applications that are in alignment with those minimum densities. So those are some of the things that happened since it was adopted. And the work that's happened to date, I talked a little bit about the comprehensive plan designations, land use designations that were assigned. And so within that, in the Park Place concept plan, that would have been some low density, medium density, and some mixed use commercial in the comprehensive plan. So what that translates to in zoning, mixed use commercial translates into the neighborhood commercial and translates into R5, and there's a little bit of R10, not a ton of that. So in 2008, the code was updated, revised, and added to. R5, for example, was not in the code prior to that, so when the concept plan was adopted, R5 was added as a new zone. The purpose of that was to allow a more diversity of housing types. And then neighborhood commercial was refined quite a bit to increase the number of permitted uses and restrict the size of standalone commercial buildings and allow live-work units. Multifamily is allowed in neighborhood commercial, but it can't be more than 50% of the building square footage, so there's a limit there. Those are some of the ways that it was initially worked into the code. The concept plan itself was kind of principally drafted on these 11 key elements that I've listed here. So in 2008, some of these elements were codified. Some of them were implemented through design standards, and others were envisioned to be implemented by future zone changes or text amendments or as just future amendments. And then following the adoption of the concept plan, there are multiple infrastructure master plans that were updated, like the TSP, the Transportation System Plan, was updated in 2013 that incorporated some of these elements. And in 2020, the Stormwater and Grading Design Standards also was updated and incorporated some of the elements that were talked about. Let's see. Okay. And I think maybe what I forgot to mention is some of the other pieces that were included in the code. I don't know if it was a result of the concept plan or simultaneously, but the Geologic Hazards Code was updated and the Natural Resources Overlay District. So there was actually a lot of work that happened that helped implement some of these ideas. Okay, so what have we done to date? We started with these 11 key elements and basically did a matrix and kind of compared these elements to the code and looked at what pieces had been implemented, what pieces had been codified, and where we thought some revisions were needed. Not only revisions to get the concept plan in the code, but maybe revisions to make the standards more clear and objective. So that's where that implementation memo that I attached in your packet, that's where that came from. We drafted that memo, and it basically goes through and describes the elements and where things were codified and where revisions are needed to further implement the element. So what we found is the need to identify or to update and revise at least 7 different chapters. Some of them are smaller changes, like, for example, the definitions section. There's a few definitions that we'll want to include there. Some of them, the medium density residential and the residential standards of Park Place. So those will have more substantial changes so that we can get the clear and objective standards in there, amended into there. And then one of the other places that we'll want to look at is there's a trails and multimodal connectivity. There's a map in the TSP that I think we might want to amend to show the trails from the concept plan in the TSP. And I think as you've heard tonight and in previous presentations, things need to be adopted in a plan in order to see them constructed and built. So that's where we would want to see some changes in the trails. Okay, I think that's what I wanted to say there. So the process going forward is going to look like a typical legislative process, a legislative amendment process where we will work through the Planning Commission. The intent is to take kind of chunks of code, because 7 chapters plus a TSP is kind of a lot to digest in one night. So we'll take chunks of it to the Planning Commission to review, to give us feedback on, and to kind of go through that implementation document that is attached and give feedback on some of those policy ideas. We'll do that work and then come back to City Commission with a check-in to talk about where that work landed. And we'll also want to give a presentation to the CIC, and I think that was a good suggestion that I saw from Ms. Smith about giving a presentation to the Park Place Neighborhood Association. So we will work with those representatives to find a time for that. That would definitely be later in the summer, I think, when we've got things a little more dialed in. And then we'll have those check-ins in that community outreach before we start the legislative process. So we're looking at kind of summer, fall for that, for that legislative hearings to start. And that's actually all I had to present. We're happy to answer questions, hear discussion, but I really just wanted to give you an overview of what had been done, what code had been implemented, what we've done over the last several months, and then what's coming up next.
Thank you, and thank you for that memo. It was a good groundwork for this discussion we're about to have, and keeping in mind that a lot of the preliminary work still is yet to happen with the Planning Commission, and that we're looking at some more high-level goals that we'd like to see, we can open it up for discussion. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Is clear and objective ever defined anywhere? Is there a definition of clear and objective?
No.
Okay.
It is not
story.
defined.
That's all I need to hear. Secondly, I think Mr. Nacita's letter bears consideration, because if I understand what he's saying these are the steps you take to not run afoul of a finding that you violated the clear and objective standard. And specifically, he's stating it only applies to housing. I don't know if that's correct or not, but that's his statement, if I understand it correctly. He's saying flexibility leaves us vulnerable to a finding that we violated the clear and objective standard. He's saying if you remove those planned elements that allow LUBA to make a finding of clear and objective, the plan becomes less vulnerable to that finding by LUBA. And he's saying that to use quantitative or numerical standards for such things as water treatment, you can't argue with a numerical standard. Now, that's my understanding of his letter, and I hope that's correct. And I'm sure that our own attorneys will provide feedback on it, but I think it had value and is worth consideration.
Yeah, certainly. I saw the comments and would like to just digest them more, but I don't see why we can't look at them and look at how we draft the code.
I don't want to fail in front of LUBA again. I don't want them to make a finding adverse to our position, and I want to do everything possible to strengthen that position. If those suggestions are worthy, then I feel take a look at them. That's where I'm at.
And as this goes through the legislative process and through the Planning Commission, I'm hopeful that our planning commissioners will have access to hearing that opinion as well. And hopefully Mr. Nacita will be able to make it out to those.
Well, I'll just say I agree with what Commissioner O'Donnell said, because if you think about what makes that concept plan different than any other subdivision is the non-housing elements of it. And if we can protect the non-housing elements of it in a way other than having to create clear and objective standards, then I think that's to our benefit. But to Commissioner O'Donnell's point, we want to make sure that we don't end up back in front of LUBA again because we've applied concepts that weren't clear and objective. So, but it's important to protect the non-housing elements of that plan because that's what really makes it unique.
And recognizing how much limited space there is within the UGB that there is for development to occur, and how we want this to be different from just your typical subdivision. And I think that was loud and clear from us when we denied the appeal, that the mixed use part was crucial to this actually living up to the concept plan. And I'll just echo what I said earlier about the Tumwata Village, is that we need more mixed use, and this is the inverse of that. The residential is there now. We need the other parts, and I think that this commission is really keen on that. So, do you have any comments?
No, nothing additional.
That's all very helpful, and we can carry that forward. I can weave in or just even attach the comments that we received tonight to send them to the Planning Commission, make sure that they see them. So.
And I do think that Mr. LaSalle's email brought up good points about the neighborhood commercial, I believe, about the feasibility of having commercial in that area, and how that might be difficult given where it is currently on the concept plan. And so also recognizing the fact that we may be constrained by market forces and what's actually viable in an area that's more secluded. But I'm sure that our planning commissioners are up to the task of trying to figure out a way that still lives up to what the community has said that they wanted. And so, yeah. Is there anything else that you need from us?
No, I guess I just want to point out with the neighborhood commercial that I think we can weave in to the code ways to protect it and ways to keep it intact. I don't know that there's a way to get development at the same time, residential and commercial. But I think there is a way to protect what we want to see there eventually. We have engaged with a couple of consultants. One is Jerry Johnson to give us an update. His firm did the initial kind of economic analysis in the concept plan. So he gave us some feedback about the need for rooftops to be in place to make that neighborhood commercial viable. So there's still kind of a timing and a phasing piece to get there. And then the other consultant, we are working with DKS, who's our on-call transportation consultant, to look at volumes on local roads. And so that will get kind of woven in. So we've got a large body of work coming up for the summer and into the fall.
And we will be looking forward to hearing updates along the way, and appreciate all the hard work on this. So if there are no further comments on that, are we all right to move on? Sure. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
So I did just want to go back to the list of future work session agenda items, which I skipped, and note that we do have another update on the McLaughlin Boulevard Enhancements project next week. And then we do have some, we talked earlier in the year about how some of our meeting dates fall on or close to holidays, and so just a reminder on that. But if there's anything to add or anything to comment on, is there? All right. We will move on to item number 4, update on city projects from the city manager.
Thank you. So, as you saw in the staff report, as it relates to the quiet zone, ODOT is still in contract negotiations for that scope of work. The second item are the charter parks. We're finalizing the draft license agreements to address the encroachments in McLaughlin Promenade. We'll begin having those discussions with property owners in the near future. Cayuse 5 Memorial, that project is underway. I believe they'll actually be out there tomorrow, beginning some of the ground disturbance in coordination with Confederate Tribes, the Umatilla Indian Reservation, the Confederate Tribes of Grand Ronde. So that's exciting, seeing that project move forward and start coming out of the ground. Courthouse, the mayor did give an update of working with the county and County Chair Smith on putting together a small task force working group to look at what happens in terms of the ownership of the courthouse. So we're still waiting on the county to follow up on the creation of that working group. You had the presentation tonight concerning Tumwata Village. Don't really have anything else to add there more than what you've seen tonight with their presentation, and then no additional updates on
All right. Any questions? Moving on, Commissioner O'Donnell, committee reports.
Nothing new since my last report on South Fork, other than the American Waterworks thing is coming up. And that's about the only news.
Thank you. Commissioner Smith.
We had a scheduled Clackamas Heritage Partners meeting that got canceled and moved, so no reports on that, and I think that's it.
All right. Commissioner Mitchell.
I have nothing tonight.
Okay. I will just say, so our tolling strategy subcommittee is on hiatus right now as we try and reconfigure what it is that we want our response to be now that tolling is on yet another election-related pause. But as we look to 2025 and the state legislature begins looking at another funding package, I think that's kind of the next milestone that we're looking at being involved with. And so we're on hiatus there. C4, you all should have received an email. All are invited to attend our C4 retreat in June. CIC, we will be having a work session next month, I believe, on top of our regular meeting to discuss what a more equitable budgetary process might look for the CIC and the way that it doles its money out to the neighborhoods. And so that conversation continues. And then lastly, I just want to put a plug for our Youth Advisory Commission clothing drive. There is a drop-off at City Hall. They are collecting products for high school age students. It's a big need that we've heard from the local PTA clothes closet, that's an age group where they generally need or have a lot more needs. And so the Youth Advisory Commission is collecting products for that, both at the high school and at City Hall. So if there's anything that folks are looking to donate, then please go ahead and do that by May 23rd. So that is what I have for my committee reports. Thank you all for a good meeting, and I hope that I made you proud chairing my first meeting. So seeing no further comments, I will adjourn tonight's meeting.